Good morning and welcome to the Tuesday, September 10th, 2013 Board of County Commissioners regular meeting. I'll ask you to please rise as we'll have Jeffrey R. Smith, Clerk of the Court, lead us in an invocation, followed by a Pledge of Allegiance by Commissioner Bob Solari. And at such point, I'll ask you to remain standing as I have a comment to make. Thank you.
Let us pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this time, Lord, that we can come and to do thy business here for Indian River County. Lord, we just ask that you would have your guidance and strength on these gentlemen as they make decisions that impact us all each day, Lord, and just give them your wisdom, your knowledge, and your compassion to do the right thing. Lord, tomorrow is a special day. 12 years ago tomorrow, this country incurred a tremendous tragedy, and we just pray for those that were lost, those that have been affected by that tragedy ever since, Lord, and may we never forget what happened. Lord, remind us of your direction in 1 John chapter 3, verse 1, which says, reflect upon the love that you have given us so that we may be children of God. Lord, just help us to reflect on that this day and every day as we go through and make decisions for you. These things we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Please join me in the pledge. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ladies and gentlemen, 12 years ago and 24 hours, just about 24 hours, a horrific event took place here in the United States. Personally, I lost several dozen friends and colleagues. Nearly 3,000 individuals were lost on that horrific and tragic event. And while we are, as Americans, we lost a chunk of our America, we're resilient and we've come to grow above and beyond our tragic loss. But we should never forget, and I should hope that all of us take a moment to reflect. And I ask of you now to take a moment of silence to remember those families. Over 3,000 families have had a significant loss as this chunk of America was taken away from us. Thank you. I did not mean to start the meeting off in such a somber tone, but I believe we owe it to all those who have unwittingly sacrificed their lives, unknowingly sacrificed their lives. Next item on the agenda is the additions and deletions to the agenda. Emergency items. Gentlemen, anything?
Move approval as presented.
That's a motion by Commissioner O'Brien, seconded by Commissioner Solari. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next item on the agenda is proclamations, presentations. A presentation of proclamation recognizing the month of September 2013 as Hunger Action Month. It will be presented by Commissioner O'Brien, and receiving will be Krista Garofalo, the Chief Public Relations and Strategy Officer for the Treasure Coast Food Bank. And you'll recognize them by their orange attire. Please come on up, ladies. Bring your team up, Krista. Commissioner O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You can just wait right there at the podium. Yep, good. And I'll go ahead and read the proclamation, and then if you all would like to provide some comments. And as you can see, the board is fully participating with our orange ties, and we appreciate all that you do to help bring awareness to this issue. So this is a proclamation recognizing the month of September 2013 as Hunger Action Month. Whereas hunger and poverty are issues of grave concern in the United States, the state of Florida, the Treasure Coast, and Indian River County. And whereas Indian River County is committed to taking steps to raise awareness about the need to combat hunger in every part of our county and to provide additional resources that the citizens of Indian River County need. And whereas Indian River County is committed to working with the Treasure Coast Food Bank in educating people about the role and importance of food banks in addressing hunger and raising awareness of the need to devote more resources and attention to hunger issues. And whereas more than 99,230 individuals on the Treasure Coast and Indian River County rely on food provided by the Treasure Coast Food Bank annually, and whereas Treasure Coast Food Bank distributed more than 10 million pounds of food in 2012 through its network of food pantries, soup kitchens, shelters, and other community organizations. And whereas food banks across the country, including the Treasure Coast Food Bank, will host numerous events throughout the month of September to bring awareness and attention to encourage involvement in efforts to end hunger in their local communities. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed by the Board of County Commissioners of Indian River County, Florida, that the Board recognizes the month of September 2013 as Hunger Action Month in Indian River County and calls this observance to the attention of our citizens. Adopted this 10th day of September 2013 and signed by all 5 county commissioners. Ladies, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. On behalf of our CEO, Judy Cruz, who couldn't be here this morning, our staff that's here, as well as the staff back at the office, and our board of directors, and most importantly, our partners and our clients in need. Thank you so much for helping us call attention to what we see a lot of times as a silent epidemic. Hunger is definitely a silent epidemic in our community. Nearly 100,000 people per week don't know where their next meal is coming from on the Treasure Coast. Nearly 22,000 of those people reside in Indian River County, and a good number of them are children. And we want to do everything in our power to make that go away as quickly as possible, and for that reality not to be a reality for those people. So we thank you for supporting us for Hunger Action Month. Thank you so much for wearing orange. And we encourage everybody to go to our website, stophunger.org. You can find a calendar called 30 Ways in 30 Days to help come up with ways that you can take action on Hunger Action Month to help impact hunger and help us in fighting hunger in the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, is there any events going on during the month that you want to promote? Or?
Sure. We are partnering with Ruby Tuesday, and they're doing a give back campaign where if you go to our website and download the flyer, you can get 20% of your check when you go to any participating restaurant on a given day. Will go towards the food bank, come back to us so that we can help put more food into the community and into Indian River County. We actually have an event coming up in October called Construction. It's a brand new event that we're going to do out at the Indian River Mall. Local architects and engineers are going to get together and build canned sculptures, different sculptures made out of canned food in order to promote awareness of hunger awareness. And also it'll be a fun art exhibit that people can come out and see, and all of the food will come back to us at the Treasure Coast Food Bank. That'll be starting on October 12th and be on display till the 27th at the mall. So we're hoping. And then we have coming up in March our big Wine, Women, and Shoes event, which is a big signature fundraiser for us in Vero Beach. It's going to be at the Oak Harbor Club. It's a great event with local wine, wines from all over the country, Napa and Oregon, and fabulous shopping and wonderful food that the Oak Harbor is going to be providing us. So that'll be on March 27th, 2014. So any of those things that you can come out to, and always go to our website, stophunger.org. We always have them listed and up to date.
Great, good.
You spoke of the giving, and you spoke of the fundraising. Is there something about receiving? Could individuals donate food to the food bank? And if so, how can they do that?
We run numerous food drives with local companies, individuals, and anybody that's interested in participating. Anytime that you want to be collecting food on our behalf, all you have to do is call our office. Our number is 772-489-3034. If you're interested in doing a food drive, if you're interested in coming down, bringing your food, and sorting the food and seeing some of the process of what happens once the food gets to our facility, definitely contact us. And we're definitely grateful for all of the funds that we receive, all of the food donations that we receive from all of our retail partners as well, as people doing food drives, and definitely all the people that take the time to come and help us. We can't do everything that we do without volunteers. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
Congratulations. You want to come on over?
Yeah, that would be
Thank you for your work,
so
Krista.
much.
Judy, thank you.
So much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Where do you want us? Kind of in the middle?
Yeah, in the middle of the
Okay. Okay.
Try to
Wait, I want to be in the...
shift to the left a little bit. You want us to shift to the left a little bit?
Are we good?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's that tall guy.
Bob?
Here, I'll get over on this side and balance
Okay.
them out.
It balances.
I'm short, so you can put me wherever.
Am I blocking Wesley good enough?
Great.
Good.
Thank you. Thank you once again, ladies. Thank you. Thank you. Our pleasure. Thank you, Commissioner. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes for the July 17, 2013 budget workshop.
So moved.
Second. That's a motion by Commissioner O'Brien, seconded by Commissioner Davis. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. The next item on the agenda is the informational items. Gentlemen, anything? Next is the consent agenda.
Move to approve.
Second. That's a motion by Commissioner Davis, seconded by myself. Any further discussion, gentlemen? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Moving right along to public items, we have two public notice items. Counselor?
To the Chair, the two items that we have noticed for public hearing for October 1st, 2013 is one, county-initiated request to amend the text of the Policy 5.7 of the Potable Water Sub-Element and Policy 5.8 of the Sanitary Sewer Sub-Element of the county's comprehensive plan. The second public notice item is Robert Williams' request to rezone 0.15 acres from RS-6 to RM-6.
Thank you, Counselor. Next item on the agenda is the departmental matters. It's community development, discussion, and consideration of residential decibel level thresholds in the county noise and vibration control ordinance, the LDR Chapter 974, as applied to the outdoor mechanical equipment memorandum dated August 29, 2013, found on pages 238 through 255. Good morning, gentlemen. Roland, you starting us off?
Yes, good morning,
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman. I'm Roland DuBois, Chief of County Environmental Planning and Code Enforcement. This item has to do with county noise ordinance and residential decibel thresholds as applied to outdoor mechanical equipment. Just some background, back on July 2nd at the County Commission meeting under a public discussion item, there was a pool heater noise code enforcement case issue that came before the board. Charles and Lisa Fannin at 2820 Grand Isle Way. It's an issue where you have a pool heater that's located in a side yard in a planned development with reduced setbacks from more typical setbacks with 5-foot minimum side yard setbacks with a disturbance to a neighboring property. Out of that discussion, there was a question as should the county noise ordinance decibel levels be revised, or should other solutions be looked at, such as a sound barrier wall, which was discussed. And there's a general consensus direction to staff to research decibel levels and how other jurisdictions address those issues. Since that meeting, staff's taken essentially two main approaches. One is to do some sampling of particularly AC outdoor equipment in the general county. We also did research on how other jurisdictions address the issue. First, on the issue of, or the sampling of central AC outdoor units. We had building staff sample some different brands and tonnage capacities AC units that are commonly installed in the county, comparing the manufacturer's decibel ratings, the decibel readings at the units as they're in the field, and decibel readings 10 feet from the units. The staff did the 10-foot setback to represent fairly typical setbacks where the neighbor's property line is. Most of the residential zonings in the county have 10 or 15-yard setbacks. We recognize that in this particular case that went before the board in July, it's a reduced setback development, but we'll talk about that too. But for purposes of general application countywide, we got the readings 10 feet from the units. Staff's findings that the manufacturer's ratings, and these are presented in more detail in table form in the staff report that went along with this item. This is kind of a summary. The manufacturer ratings ranged from 71 to 78 decibels during the specific testing procedures, which I believe is, from what I read, in reverberation room for the readings. What the staff found actually in the field at the units of installed units, the range was 53 to 67 decibels. And readings 10 feet from the units range from 45 to 57 decibels. The general finding in looking at the readings taken was that decibel levels appear to drop anywhere between a half and a decibel per foot setback from the sound source of the unit. The other point I want to make is the table, again, was based on those 10-foot setbacks. We did some supplemental readings in other developments with reduced setbacks. Falcon Trace, Waterford Lakes, for example, are similar to Millstone Landing. We did take a couple readings. What we did find at least one that did have a mid-70s decibel reading at the property line. Something that was different, though, in most cases, particularly with ACs, we find that they're located up near garages and in areas away from bedroom and living areas, so that's something that was one of the issues on this particular case we discussed. But let me move on.
Just rolling right there. Were any of those air conditioning units, were they buffered at all, or were they just out in the open?
Most of them were buffered by vegetation. I didn't see any, at least from the ones we tested, that had hard sound barriers.
Okay.
As far as the other approach we took in looking at how other local governments deal with the noise regulations, we found that Indian River County's decibel levels of 60 decibels for day, 55 for night was very consistent with most of the other regional counties we looked at. We looked at about 11 jurisdictions in the region, and that was pretty much right on target, consistent with some of the others. There's a couple that actually had restrictor or more strict decibel levels. We also found that some jurisdictions, for example, like Vero Beach, they don't have actual decibel thresholds for our quantitative levels. They rely on qualitative, which is essentially whether or not there's a complaint and whether it's considered a disturbance to, say, a person of reasonable and normal sensitivity. So not all local governments, like our county, have quantitative criteria as decibel levels, but those that did are consistent with ours. We also found some jurisdictions specifically addressed outdoor mechanical equipment requiring soundproofing to eliminate any off-site disturbance. There are two jurisdictions we found in Volusia County, City of Daytona Beach, which specifically exempt AC units that met manufacturers' specifications from decibel thresholds. The other jurisdictions held ACs to the regular standards they had for decibels. Just a few issues. Again, this was somewhat discussed at the July meeting, but there are site-specific issues on the fan and pool heater issue. Again, it's in a reduced setback development. The unit itself, the pool heater, is approximately 2.5 feet from the property line, approximately 8 feet from the neighbor's house, and about 11 feet from a neighbor's bedroom window. It's also between two concrete buildings, which there may be reverberation issues. And as discussed, Mr. Feynman has been cooperative through this process that staff has worked with him. He's lowered the RPMs. He's installed what's called a compressor insulator, limited nighttime hours. Even still after that, the current readings that we found was in the mid-60s, which is technically a violation of the county's decibel levels. Just to give a visual of this particular case, you can see in this, it points out approximately where the pool heater is between the two houses. The complainant's house is to the bottom left in this aerial picture. This is a plot plan of the subject property. It shows the location. You can maybe see it, but the setback of the house in his particular case is 6.7 feet from the property line. The unit itself, again, is about 2.5 feet from the property line, as I previously mentioned. Here's another view looking down the side property line between the two houses. The red arrow points out where the pool heater is. If you look to the complaining house, there is a screen porch, and that happens to be also where the bedroom window area is. And also note that the Fanons have their pool heater towards the back. To the front, you can actually see, and this is pretty typical from an AC unit standpoint. When we looked at most of them, they were located towards the front in their garage space and buffered by vegetation. Some of the alternatives for the board to consider in looking at the issue is, one would be to increase the county's noise ordinance residential decibel thresholds countywide. Other would be to consider exempt outdoor mechanical equipment that meets manufacturer's specifications from the decibel levels. It could eliminate qualitative noise thresholds in the county's ordinance at decibel levels and rely on qualitative, or leave the noise ordinance as is and require site-specific resolution. Another approach would be to develop procedures to address the location and sound buffering of mechanical equipment in PDs and small lot subdivisions, in particular where there are reduced setbacks. And looking at the alternatives, just going down the list that we have, from a staff perspective, we think that increasing the noise ordinances countywide, the decibel levels, staff does not support that. I mean, just from the perspective of code enforcement cases, we really don't have a lot of these. This is a pretty uncommon case that we've been dealing with. We feel it's more of a site-specific issue for the reasons that were cited. There are some local governments that do exempt outdoor mechanical equipment completely from the decibel levels, but again, we don't feel that that's necessary because of the uncommonness of this, the complaints we've gotten on these issues. From a staff perspective, and this is our recommendation, we think that the board should consider not changing the decibel thresholds, but instead direct staff to develop procedures to deal with and minimize noise issues of outdoor mechanical equipment in these developments, these PDs and small lot subdivisions with the reduced setbacks. And that might entail specifically looking at the location to try to preemptively keep units away from neighbors' living areas, bedroom windows, in areas where it would be less intrusive, and look at from those perspectives. And that's our summary. Thank you.
Mr. DeBlois, you mentioned that you do not have too many calls regarding air conditioner and pool heater noise, but in relation to code enforcement cases, do you see any response for that specific decibel level on other matters? Again, we do have some challenges during hurricane season if there are generators being used, but as we discussed, but which is an exempt period due to emergency. But do you have any other data in relation to response or having code enforcement officers respond 2 noise complaints in that specific zone of 60 to 70.
We've had occasional noise complaints. Some have related to other types of things. We've had, for example, loud birds, things like that. We've had generators. I think I recall one case where there was a generator issue, and that did lead to an ordinance amendment that allowed for testing of generators but limited it otherwise to meet our requirements, things like that. But in general, we have not found or had many code cases on these types of outdoor mechanical equipment. Again, we did, based on Mr. Fannon's indications at the last discussion, he indicated that this was not uncommon, his particular circumstance, particularly in the reduced setback developments. And we did take some supplemental readings. We found that, again, a number of those met our current codes, but we did find at least one that did not. So there are out there. But again, I think what we found was part of the issue is the location of the unit and how it's presented in the context of the development. And there's certain issues that he has that has caused this issue or resulted in this.
And over the years, we have had several other complaints, and it's really helped to have the decibel level standards in place. We had one in relation to petroalgae a couple of years ago, and when we went out there and took the readings, it did not exceed our decibel level. So we were able to, using quantitative criteria, say it wasn't a problem. And recently, in the last year or so, we had a noise complaint down in the area near Enos, and that, again, when we went out and tested it, didn't exceed our decibel level. So we've had noise complaints we've dealt with over the years, and it's really been helpful to have the decibel levels. It would have been more problematic if we're just using qualitative criteria and just telling the complainant, no, we don't think it's a problem. We're able to document that the decibel levels were below the thresholds.
Thank you. Gentlemen?
Question, have you seen on equipment complaints on noise, as the efficiency goes up, it seems to be the fan speed, the blades are bigger, the noise in the last 5 years has probably gone up with the efficiency of the equipment. Has there been a trend of complaints with the newer, more efficient equipment being installed?
We did not really find a trend comparing newer to older, but we did find most of the newer, or a lot of the ones that are now being installed, and this is reflected in the table. We consistently found a manufacturer's rating in the mid-70s, but actually in the field, when you're at the unit, it's almost like 10 decibels less than that, or they're all generally meet our current decibels. So again, we were focusing from a testing standpoint on ACs, air conditioning units, because it was something we could test readily in the field. We did not do a lot of readings on pool heaters, so we don't have that information.
Mr. Davis?
Wasn't it a pool heater that brought this all to our attention?
Yes.
Well, again, I've taken some time to look at the internet. I trust you all have too, and if it's on the internet, it must be true, right? But there was some interesting data, not a whole lot on pool heaters. More often it was in relation to air conditioners, which is the opposite. It's a heat pump that's putting heat back into the system. And there was some interesting data that because I questioned that too about the cost factor. As we get more efficient, they are getting a bit louder with the larger blades, and we're handling more air and we're exhausting more air. But interestingly enough, it is cost related. If you want to spend a few extra dollars, you could find something between the 52 and 61 decibel level that would be quite suitable. Unfortunately, as you get more efficient, it does increase the cost. But if you want to truly increase the cost and comply with the noise ordinance, you can. They are available. So inexpensive may not be the option. I'm not saying that's the case here, but it was apparent that units that can comply with our ordinance are available. And I don't know how efficient they would be or how the application would be. In addition, we looked at, for example, vacuum cleaners and hair dryers, 70 decibels. I don't know if anybody's ever tried to talk to a family member in the house while there was a vacuum or a hair dryer going on, but 70 decibels is quite disturbing. And Commissioner O'Brien had used his app to examine, and I do not have a phone that does that, but my wife and I were looking at different things that happened in the household with her phone, and sure enough, normal conversation, I'm at normal conversation, is in just in the tolerance level or beyond. The interesting thing is it's momentary. I can't imagine having something beyond the current decibel level for 4, 6, or 8 hours next to my household. I believe that it might be quite unsettling and disturbing. And if we open up the door for the pool heaters, then I think we're opening up the door for all avenues of noise, and I think we'll deteriorate the quality of life we have in Indian River County by doing so. With that said, anybody else have anything? If not, I see any members of the public that would like to speak regarding this matter. Please come forward, state your name and address for the record, and we'd like to hear your input.
I'm Lisa Fannin.
Good morning.
Hi. I'm the neighbor that's probably been writing to you all, and you guys have been getting correspondence from my husband.
And thank you.
Sorry. When we put this pool in, we were not here. We're from Alaska. And the guy that put in our pool had everything done right. He had the permits. They approved everything. We thought we were good to go. Dotted our I's, crossed our T's, did everything we could. Lo and behold, we have a neighbor that doesn't like the sound. They come and complain, call the cops on our heater. We didn't know we were doing anything wrong. It was approved by the county. If they have a decibel reading of 55 to 60, why did they not check that when they improved our pool? It was approved 3 different times for the pool, the pump, the whole heater, everything. So here we are, square one again. We've been dealing with this since January. It's put a huge stress on our family, on our living, on our quality of life. We've never even been in an HOA before. In Alaska, people live in peace. They just really get along up there. I don't understand this Florida thing. I'm sorry. Whole different world. Thank you. Nevertheless, here we are. It's just really impacted our quality of life. We've done nothing wrong. We've tried everything we can do to make this right with our neighbors, put an insulator around our pool heater. We attempted to go to the HOA with a vinyl fence to put in because our neighbors down the street have a vinyl fence. They did approve it. Of course, they shot ours down. Our neighbors complained and said, that would be ugly. We don't want to look at that. So they talked to the HOA, and the HOA backed them up and said, okay, you're right. We don't want vinyl fences in here. Put in a concrete sound barrier. Okay, so we went to investigate that. It has to be at least a foot past our pool heater for the proper ventilation. We would be infringing on our neighbor's property line. We cannot put up a sound barrier. We've actually had the representatives for Reams come, and they've actually tightened our fans, done everything they could to lower the decibel level. We don't know what to do at this point. Decibel levels in our neighborhood are all the air conditioners. We've gone down and checked probably 20 or 30 in Millstone Landing, about 20 or 30 in Falcon Trace, 20 or 30 in Waterford Lakes. All of them are reading around 68 to 75 decibels. Our unit of air conditioner is a King unit. They didn't even check for a King unit when they did their sample research. Their research did 1 or 2 houses in Falcon Trace, 1 or 2 maybe in Waterford's. If they really did check the whole areas where these thresholds are so close together, they'd have seen that the decibel limits are way higher than what they're proposing. The other issue, too, is I do know quite a few neighbors on Newmark Circle whose air conditioner units are right under the bedroom windows. I have friends who say every day, their air conditioner is set at about 72 because they like it cooler at night. We hear their air conditioner go off when we're sleeping. We tune it out. We get used to it. We put in triple pane windows if we need to. I know the neighbors have put up foliage around their house to try to buffer the sound and stuff. It's not our fault this happened. We don't know what to do. We don't feel like it should be our responsibility to move our pool, be limited to when we use our pool, don't use our pool. We did everything right. We're asking you, what would you propose? We just feel like the decibel limits are way too low. We've got neighbors who have the exact same pool put in. It was a Reams unit. It meets the specifications for the manufacturer's decibel rating. Maybe give us an exemption on that. That would be great if you don't want to change the ordinance, but we just feel like we're at wit's end here. We had a police officer that came to our house at the time that they complained. He said our air conditioner unit was too loud and it was by the neighbor's window. They put in triple pane windows. End of story, they were fine. We haven't been that fortunate. We've had a big runaround and it's been pretty stressful. So this is like the third hearing we've been to, and we just feel like we need some resolution. Appreciate you hearing us. It's been kind of a quandary. But we do appreciate you guys. I know we've been shooting letters to you and stuff, and we just have been very, very frustrated. So whatever you can do to consider our case would be great.
Thank you, Mr. Fanning.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning. I'm Stanford Erickson. I live in Millstone as well. And if she spent about $100 more, as you suggested, she'd have a heater that met those specifications. She spent less than $100, and therefore she has one. So she has a personal problem. And it should not affect the rulings by the county. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Good morning.
Good morning. I'm Dan Lamson, the director of the Indian River Neighborhood Association. I live at 737B Timber Ridge Trail in Vero Beach. And I have a small prepared statement from the Indian River Neighborhood Association on the noise and vibration control ordinances. The Indian River Neighborhood Association commends the environmental planning and code enforcement staff for a thorough and comprehensive report on Indian River County's current noise and vibration control ordinances. The report highlighted that Indian River County has residential decibel thresholds which are on par with local and comparable municipalities and counties. The protections provided in this ordinance are there to safeguard the rights of property owners to live in peace and quiet. And those safeguards are provided consistently throughout the county. The IRNA feels that the integrity and sanctity of neighborhoods would be negatively impacted by a removal or easing of residential decibel thresholds. While staff presented several alternatives to the county's current decibel limits, the Indian River Neighborhood Association agrees with staff recommendations that residential district decibel levels should remain as they are now. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Anyone else? Councilor.
Good morning, Chairman. Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Warren Dill, a local attorney in the area, and I represent Denise and Pat Kelly, the neighbors that are having the problem. And I can hear, as you heard, the frustration in Mrs. Fannon's voice. But there's as much frustration on my client's side as there is on the Fannin side. It is a difficult situation, and we understand that. But we're not dealing with an air conditioner here. Air conditioners phase off and on, as you all know. We're dealing with a pool heater that when it goes on, it stays on for long periods of time. That's a huge difference right here between pool heaters and air conditioners. This is a one-owner problem. It's not a county-wide problem. Your staff has testified that this is probably the first time they've ever had a pool heater issue like this with the sound decibels. Yes, they've had issues with air conditioners. You may recall St. Andrew's School. Years ago, they had a serious problem with their air conditioning over there, when I think they were put in new at the time, by the neighbors. And it came to the county commissioners, but St. Andrews was able to shield that noise and buffer it and solve the problem without asking you to change your rules countywide. In our situation, the noise problem is compounded by the small size of the lots in Millstone, and the minor setbacks. It's a PD, and it's a nice development. But with PDs, as you know, developers can work with staff and change the rules. Well, they did that. Their setbacks are about 5 feet, 5 to 6 feet at maximum in there, and the lots were smaller than normal. And they've got very nice-sized homes on them in there. I think staff's recommendation is excellent to try to come up with maybe some rules in the future that this can be addressed earlier on in the review process. In this case, the pool heater is approximately 2.5 to 3 feet from my client's property line. I mean, that's really close. And we're dealing here with a cube size pool heater that's about 4 feet tall and approximately 3 feet wide, 2.5, 3 feet. I didn't go on her property to measure it, but it's a big piece of equipment. And big equipment generates, or can generate, big noise. And that's the issue here. They do make what they call silent pool heaters that can be purchased. Now, I don't know if it's totally silent, but it's got to be a lot better than the situation we have here. I read in some of the correspondence that Mr. and Mrs. Fanning say that the county approved their pool heater, and Mrs. Fanning told you that today. Well, that's true. They came in and got a building permit for it. But the building permit is not in a position to analyze, and they're not required to analyze, a manufacturer's sound ratings with what's in the code for noise levels. Sure, they got a pool heater, and they did all the right things, but that's no reason for them to be able to say, well, it's the county's fault. It's not the county's fault. It's not the building department's fault that their noise heater is generating all this noise. You've seen some pictures of staff. I mean, I didn't have a nice presentation. I have the old-fashioned way here. I have some pictures of Google Earth. No, I'm just going to pass them out to you. Clerk, or where do I get it?
You can give it to us, we can pass it, and ultimately the clerk will have a copy of it for permanent record, Counselor.
All right, thank you very much. You'll see on the Google Earth picture the two homes. It's very similar to what staff has shown you on there. My client's home is there with the number 2830 on it, and immediately next door is the Mr. and Mrs. Fanning's home. The pool heater is right off that rear corner of my client's home, just directly across. That's where the pool heater is located. And you can see visually here the short distance between these homes here. It's approximately 8 feet from the heater to the lanai, which is a major living area in these homes. And my client's bedroom window is right on the lanai, and it's maybe 11, 12 feet, I guess, from their bedroom windows. Mrs. Fannin had said earlier that maybe my client should be responsible for this and put in soundproof windows. Well, maybe they might do that someday. But it's not their problem, and they don't have to solve it. They've already spent $900 on vegetation hoping to solve the problem. You know, this reminds me, the location of the pool heater reminds me of the old days when we had packaged sewer plants in the county. Where do you think the developers put them? They didn't put them in the middle of their project. They put them out in the corner somewhere so it would affect other properties around them, but not their development. Mr. and Mrs. Fannin could have chosen to move this pool heater closer to the air conditioners, where staff pointed out they were up by the road, and not back in the living area of these homes. They could have chosen to put them on the other side of their house. They could have chosen to put them closer to the pool area, but these choices would have made it more difficult for them with the noise. It seems like the Fannins want to solve their problem by asking you to jump into this and change the rules countywide. That's just illogical. It's not a countywide issue. It's a single property, single owner problem, and there's no need to change the rules countywide. My client is willing to work with the Fannons, and she does have some suggestions and things that perhaps can be done. As you know, when these problems start, they fester and they get worse and worse, and all of a sudden nobody's talking to anybody anymore. But there are some solutions out there, we believe. So today, I would ask that you accept your staff's recommendation and not change the rules for everybody else in the county because we have a single neighbor problem here. Accept staff's recommendation and let them come up with some rules that perhaps could address this in the future. You know, if you change the rules, or you change the law every time somebody has a problem and wants it changed, eventually we're going to end up in a lawless society. It just doesn't make sense to keep changing the rules because there's a problem, particularly on a problem like this. Staff knows, and you know and I know, that the result of this problem is because it's smaller lots that are closer together. It's not your standard subdivision. If it were, we wouldn't be here today. So I ask that you not throw yourself in the middle of this and let your code enforcement board deal with it, let the neighbors deal with it, and maintain the peace and harmony in the rest of the county. Thank you.
Thank you, Council. Is there anyone else wishing to speak regarding this matter? Good morning.
Good morning. My name's Denise Kelly, and I live next to the Fannons. I just want to be able to sit out on my lanai and read a book. And during the winter months, their heater is on 14 hours minimum. It's like sitting next to your air conditioning unit. And people have said, oh, it just sounds like a loud air conditioning unit. Pull up a Chase Lounge and sit next to your air conditioning unit and see how relaxing that is after 15 or 20 minutes. You just get up and go inside. We bought a house with no noise. I mean, we'll look into the impact glass windows, but what do I do about our lanai and porch area? Does that mean that I can't sit outside? The Fannons have been able to enjoy their pool all year. The code enforcement has been very generous in letting them run their pool heater to 10 p.m. at night. And it did run all winter long, close to May, to the middle of May, to 10 p.m. I had to go up north for 2 months. And who wants to be up north in March and April? You want to be here in Florida. That's why we bought this home. I contacted the newspaper and we wrote an article, and it's been surprising how much support we have to not change the decibel limit. People seem to feel that the Fannons are a little entitled, that it's not just about them, it's about our whole community, and we need to have a peaceful community. And my husband and I will try to work with the Fannons as much as possible. I've contacted an acoustic engineer, and basically he's telling me with residential facilities, the houses are so close, the noise is just going to bounce from house to house. So the wall will only be possible if they put a lid on it and it's totally enclosed. The first solution, he said, was just to move the equipment. He said it's 100% effective and it's the cheapest solution to go. And I know the Fannons don't want to do that. So there really is very few, I guess, solutions to this problem. But I appreciate you listening to me. I asked Mr. Erickson to be here today because he does have a noiseless heater. His property line is very close to his neighbors. He turns his noiseless heater on, and it's less than their filter. So thank you very much for letting me speak.
Anyone else wishing to speak regarding this matter? Gentlemen?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. A couple of things. If you look at the size of a pool heater today and you look at one 10 years ago, they're almost double the size, and that's because of the larger blade size, the housing that makes them, the efficiency. Whatever it does, it makes the box bigger that they sit in to house the equipment. And you did point out that there is more expensive equipment that they could have purchased, but the equipment that their contractor did purchase and put in did meet the state of Florida and the other requirement guidelines. It met the minimum standard. So how would a homeowner know the difference? It's, they're kind of the innocent party in this, I see. So yes, you can always spend more on equipment and get the most cutting-edge efficiency, but you also have a minimum standard that you can't go below, and I think that the applicants went with that standard that's acceptable. And as many people that move here from out of the area, they call a licensed pool contractor. Licensed pool contractor puts in, here's the minimum grade equipment that you can put in. It all meets all the required codes, but then you get into this noise decibel part. I'm more in line on equipment side to have something that matches, because each year, I think every other year, the state or trying to think which agency it regulates this in Tallahassee, but they're always notching up and bumping up the standards. And every time they do that, the equipment changes. It gets more efficient, but also has these other side effects that go along with it. On this particular case, it is a little bit unique when you have those types of houses. I drove through the neighborhood there, and to get it quiet enough to read a book is pretty quiet. I mean, that would be. I have 3 kids at home. I never have that kind of quiet. And I hear my neighbors' pool equipment and air conditioner and things go on and off. And granted, I'm not sitting out on the back porch hearing it, but it is outside my bedroom window, so I do hear it when it comes on and go off. But I just kind of, at some point, I don't hear it anymore. But if you're trying to be out on your lanai, that is a difficult situation. But as the state and the feds keep upping the efficiency standards, these noise issues, I'm sure they take that in consideration, but they are going to be potentially noisier in the future just because of, to get the efficiency, something's got to give, whether it's the size of the blade, the RPMs of the blade, all that compounds and creates more noise, makes it more efficient. So I think it was it Volusia County that had their ordinance matched up with whatever the meets manufacturer specification or exempt from decibel thresholds. I don't necessarily like that language, but I would like something that would be, if it meets the state and federal standards for energy efficiency, whether it's a pool heater or an air conditioner, that if it meets the standards, then it would be accepted. Let's see if there's any other discussion on that. Hearing crickets.
What are you looking to move on this?
Well, I just want to see if there's any other comments first.
Yeah, please, Commissioner Solari.
I think this is a case where there's no right or no wrong. However, we do have a noise ordinance, and it does seem to work for the vast majority of cases. And the staff recommendation to me seems very reasonable. And in this case, the problem seems to be because a developer and then a group of homeowners decided to build and then live in a planned development community. And I'm guessing that the homeowners who live there chose to live in that planned development because of certain beneficial or things that they thought were beneficial characteristics to them in that development. But generally, when you decide that you're going to get some benefits from a certain situation, you often have some of the burdens. And I think the burdens in this case have to deal with how, given the closeness to your neighbor, you deal with things like these type of noises and stuff like that. So, with Ms. Kelly already living there, established, I think she has rights to expect that county ordinances are going to be adhered to. And while the Fannons came in from Alaska, and there's certainly, I'm not saying there's any fault on their part at all, but the burden, I think, would be on that homeowner to follow the county code. And actually on there, if they have a licensed contractor, they should have been quick enough to realize that, this close to another house, you're going to have some problems. So, especially with something like noise, which can be very disturbing to a lot of people, in this case, I see no reason to change our noise ordinance. They've been pointed out that there are a couple viable alternatives, even though they may be somewhat expensive, but I think that that type of added expense is part of the burden of living in this type of community. So unless I hear something very different, I will be supporting staff recommendation today.
Thank you, Commissioner Slurry. Councilor, did you have anything?
I have a question for somebody out in the audience. How much do these the noiseless pool heaters cost? Does anybody know? Sir?
I have one.
Could you come up, please?
You need to come to the microphone so the viewing...
It's Stanford Erickson again, and we have wonderful neighbors in Millstone, and this is sort of a peculiar situation. But we have a pool heater that we put in, and it costs about $500, and it's a very quiet one. If you spend about $400, you have one like the Fanning's pool. So it's only about $100 more. And I think the neighbors have been involved in this, and we've all said, work together. We found that, in my opinion, that the Fannings were less likely to work together. Now, that, people fight and things like this, and we don't like that. But it's $100.
So it's $500 for a noiseless heater?
$500.
Bottom line?
Yes.
Okay.
And you get one for about $350, and it doesn't fit it, and about $400 doesn't fit it.
Has Mrs. Kelly come to your house and sat next to your heater? Do you know? Ms. Kelly, could you?
No one's complained about our heater, but no, I don't know if she's come to our house and the heater's been on. She hasn't complained about it.
How I look at this is I agree with
you can come to my house and listen to my heater anytime you want. You went to the Fanning's house and you listened to their heater. Come to my house, listen to my heater.
Okay. I kind of agree with staff's position that this is an isolated incident and we shouldn't be changing our ordinances. Earlier when this came up back in July, there was some discussion whether the Kellys had offered to throw in some money to pay for the cost to move the heater. And I know the Fannings have said the cost to build the cement soundproofing wall was like $2,500. It seems to me that the Fannings and Kellys would agree to split the $500 and buy a noiseless heater. It's less cost than building the wall.
That sounds very logical to me.
They just both put in $250, put in the noiseless one, and we become neighbors again.
That was my feeling, and that was a suggestion I made. And I think it just got so angry with one another they didn't want to cooperate, and it's probably both their faults at this point.
Right. Well, to me, that's the cheapest, easiest solution, and gets everybody back as good neighbors, and we don't have to change any ordinances.
And I agree, Commissioner. I believe there is a viable solution. I believe that we do have, it was pointed out earlier, that we have an HOA that has certain rules and requirements at very closely built residences. Someone is approved for a barrier, someone was not approved for a barrier. I think we have to go back to the drawing board. I think we have to work with staff. Staff has shown a willingness to come up with some solutions. You've gone through the trouble of hiring an acoustic engineer, and I believe with all of that, there is a viable solution if we take the personality out of the quotient. I believe that there is, we've just heard another recommendation. Well, that's one that presents cost on both parties. But I do believe that you can find an area of comfort so that you all can be neighbors once again. And I do believe, again, Counselor, that this is a very isolated situation, and by staff's own admission that we do not get these calls. In addition, the pool heaters, to me, are recreational or luxury additions. They are attachments to our lifestyle. Whereas air conditioners, as was pointed out by Roland DeBlois, that with the readings, air conditioners are a necessity. They are a necessity. We all agree. We've all had some sleepless nights during power failures, and there are times where I've just had a new air conditioner installed, and it does have the unfortunate location of underneath my window. So there are some times where I hear my own air conditioner. Well, who can I challenge or complain to? Nobody else has complained, and it does conform with the standards, but it is a little uncomforting. Sometimes a sleepless night on sweat far outweighs a noiseful one. But in addition, I think we have to do a series of trade-offs. We have to understand that we have to work with each other, and I encourage staff to come up with other solutions if they are available. And I implore that you appeal to your HOA saying, we need this. Another solution might be perhaps when Mrs. Fanning said that when she wanted to put a barrier up, it would encroach upon your property. I think 6 inches on this, on a fence, that might reduce the resonation of the sound, might add a whole lot to the quality of life. They're willing to put up that type of sound barrier, maybe like a polyethylene fence that I've seen around so many, that might be the trick to reducing the resonation of the noise to your household as well. So I believe there's a number of ways that we can work together to work out a solution, to work it happen, as opposed to having us change an ordinance that will affect 140,000 citizens, their way of life, and their manner in which they purchase items that might produce noise, and then have to look up at the sound qualifications. I remind you that when you purchase something, the material safety data sheet and the specifications are all attached to it, and you have the opportunity to look at it to see if it falls within the guidelines. I did ask staff if when they do look at the application, is it about the noise? And the answer was no. It's about the proper installation, safe installation, and falling within building codes. So I think the onus should be back to the homeowner that needs to comply to the sound ordinance as opposed to adjusting it. Thank you.
Bob Johnson, Carlin Subdivision.
Good morning, Mr. Johnson.
I think the county has a little responsibility here too. This is one of the side effects of a approval by the county commission of a plan development, where all of a sudden certain things happen that nobody can really anticipate the property size, and the situation has occurred today. I have a third recommendation, that the county waive all of the new proposed costs, permitting and all these kind of additional costs. If the solution is to move that unit, that the county not come up with new cost, that they waive all the county permitting costs that may occur, and whatever the answer to the solution is. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Anything further? Ms. Fannin would like to make a comment?
I need to make one more comment. The comment you made about putting up the barrier wall, we entertained that before we realized it would infringe on their property line. Lo and behold, the county told us that even if we put up the barrier wall and paid the $2,500, if it doesn't meet the decibel limits, they wouldn't give us an exemption. Now, why would anybody pay $2,500 to put in a barrier wall, not knowing if it's going to meet your decibel level or not? That just didn't make sense. We're at wit's end here. We haven't done anything wrong. Our pool guy approved the pool. You guys came out 3 different times. The county came out 3 different times to check on the heater and the pump and the location of where it was at. We're just asking for an exemption of some kind. I mean, we have done everything, even being stonewalled by the neighbors because they didn't want to look at a fence proposition. So they went to the HOA and said, that would be ugly. We don't want to look at that when we're sitting on our lanai. We don't want to see a vinyl fence up there. We've been batting our heads against the wall here, and we're just asking for some kind of reprieve.
Thank you, Mr. Fannin.
Thank you.
Commissioner Solari.
At this point, Mr. Chairman, I'm still not convinced that this is anything more than a neighbor's problem. It's unfortunate. I can't go along with Commissioner O'Brien's suggestion that they split the cost, because I'm not Solomon. I can't split the baby and say, one side's right, one side's wrong. The fact is that Ms. Kelly did nothing wrong. I'm not saying the Fannins did anything wrong, but it was the Fannins, not the Kellys, who didn't adhere to the county ordinances. So given all this, I'm going to move staff recommendation.
Second. It's a motion by Commissioner Solari, seconded by myself. Any further discussion, gentlemen? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you all for your input. Thank you, Council. The next item on the agenda for departmental matters is the Office of Management Budget Quarterly Report. The memorandum dated August 26, 2013, found on pages 256 through 268. Good morning, Mr. Brown.
Thank you, Commissioner Flesher. For the record, Jason Brown, County Budget Director. Have a brief quarterly budget report to present to you today. We're a little later than usual because we avoided the last meeting. Here's the first financial indicators kind of dashboard, I call it, where we go over the various revenues and look how things are doing compared to the previous year and compared to budget. On the left-hand side, it compares the month and the year-to-date to the previous year, and on the right-hand side, the comparisons are for the budget the same way, in the same manner. First on the list is gas tax. We are experiencing a decrease in the gas tax that is fairly unique among our revenues. Most of our other revenues are up. Gas taxes, whether folks are driving less or driving more fuel-efficient vehicles, or some combination of both, that is going down, while most of our other revenues that are generated by economic activity and people moving about are going up. So you'll see optional sales tax up about 4.7% from last year, half-cent sales tax about 4.5% from the previous year. Impact fees are substantially up, and we see this same experience down in the building department as our building permits are up, hopefully showing signs of strengthening construction activity in the county.
Can I ask just a quick question about that? Where is that in relation to? I mean, it was so bad that it's really being skewed as up a certain percentage. I guess. Something historical as far as compared to 2005, 6, 7, 8.
Sure. Traffic impact fees, for example. We're showing traffic impact fees are up 20%. We'll collect about $2 million of traffic impact fees, so we are up substantially from last year. However, as you mentioned, those numbers are way down. At the very peak in 2005, we collected about $32 million in traffic impact fees. Obviously, that is not a time that we think we will return to. There was quite a lot of activity, and there were also large developments paying those large chunks of impact fees at that time also to get development in. So we are up, as you mentioned correctly. We're up from very low numbers. We're still way below where we were in 2005.
Okay, so I'm trying to find a year.
In that one district.
Okay.
We're probably, in the building department, we're probably still down 60% from where we were. I don't think you'll ever see us go back to the 2004 levels. It was the perfect storm because you had the hurricane and then you had the boom. So you had a lot of permits.
And that's what I'm trying to figure out, Joe. I'm trying to figure out what can we relate this to. So I don't want to use 4 or 5 or even 6, quite frankly. I mean, just what.
So, Commissioner, why don't you ask if Jason can, the next time he comes before us, give us an average of impact fees from 2000 to 2003,
or even just a graph.
Yeah, why don't we give you a 5-year history on impact fee in the building department?
Yeah, and you'd almost have to do it in the time whenever we impose the new impact fee schedule. So you're going back to 2003 would not really be, it wouldn't help. It would be data. It wouldn't be a dollar figure, it'd just be a numbers figure. I guess maybe the number would be accurate to a certain.
The number and the unit count that goes with it, because then you can have higher volume, lower unit, or higher, or vice versa.
And I'm just trying to wrap my mind around there is some growth happening out there, and we're seeing that kind of ripple through the community, but just to what extent is what I'm trying to wrap my mind around.
Okay, and we could get a useful number that we use as like number of single-family building permits pulled and stuff like that to kind of give
that would probably be best.
A trend, because some of that in 2005 was Millstone Landing, Falcon Trace, some of those developments paying 500
WCI.
500 units, and those weren't even being built. So so that's kind of skewed even more so than the economy.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll get that for you. tourist tax, we're seeing some good strength there. We're up about 5% from last year. Tourist tax was kind of the leader locally in the economy. It was, while everything else was still headed downhill, tourism seemed to be picking up. For example, last year we were up 11.5% from the previous year, an 8% increase the year before that. Now we're up 5%. So we are having a few good years of growth, and we're basically back to the peak levels. Now that is not adjusted for inflation. Obviously, there's been inflation between here and there. So we are collecting tourist tax that's about equivalent to what we collected in 2005. Now, of course, it costs more to buy a loaf of bread and things like that than it did in 2005. But without inflation, we're back at those historical highs, basically. Next, Recreation Department, we're seeing some slight decreases from the previous year in the revenues. However, our expenses are down a little bit, and so our percentage of the expenses that are funded by revenues are a little bit higher than the previous years. Building Department, as we mentioned, up showing net income of about $300,000. We're up a couple $100,000 from last year, and as Joe said, while our revenues are up over 20% from last year, we still are down about 40% from the high. Golf course down a little bit. We suffered some early losses early in the season. However, we're showing a strong net income of $900,000, down a little bit, down about $40,000 from last year. However, we are anticipating that we may be able to finish payoff of an interfund loan there this year, and we have the refinancing of those bonds, the golf course bonds that were approved earlier last month, actually now. That will provide about $40,000 in savings next year in interest costs. Fleet, we're down about $20,000 from last year. Those were earlier numbers. We did do a mid-year reduction in staffing, as we're always monitoring the results, and we're on break-even footing there. Landfill's up about $100,000 from last year. Still anticipate a loss here this year, and that's one of the reasons that we are recommending that rate increase, slight rate increase for next fiscal year. Shooting range, we're down about $30,000 from last year. However, we had mid-year baffle repairs that were needed. That was a long-term project, cost about $43,000. So if you negate that out, we're up about $10,000. So here again are some of the highlights. Franchise fees are up a little bit. From last year, we're still running maybe a little bit shy on the budget on that one. Ad valorem taxes, we've collected 95.7% of the total collection. We do budget 95% in accordance with Florida statutes. So that's one thing that's held up well with the property tax system that's in place. The auctions, even when there are delinquencies, they are nearly all purchased by folks that bid for the property tax certificates. The ad valorem amount is down about $2.5 million, and that's in line with what happened with the tax roll. Went down about 4%, and we didn't raise the millage rate, so the collections are down, and that's to be expected. There's traffic impact fees. So if you take a look at recreation, the North County pool has paid about 31% of its operations. That's through June. So a little under a third of the dollars that are needed to operate the facility are provided. However, we'll note that's as of June 30th. So July and August obviously are the big times when everybody's there. So we experience a bump there in the summer. So we'll end up more like 40% when we get through at the end of the year. So in summary, general fund, here's where we are at June 30th, which is 3/4 of the budget. We should be at about 75% if everything, all else held equal. Revenues are at 84.8%, which is due to the ad valorem collection. As I mentioned, over half of the revenues come from ad valorem taxes, and we've collected 95.7% of those. Expenses are running a little ahead at 81%, which is more than the 75%. That's due to constitutional officer draws. Those are due on the first day of the month. So frequently what happens is, so that those funds are delivered, they may be processed on the last day of the previous month. So we have like 10 draws to the sheriff, to the property appraiser, rather than 9, so that's why we're a little bit ahead there. I will say, if you look at where we'll end up, we're doing a little bit better than we budgeted. The half-cent sales tax is benefiting this fund about $150,000. We got another $150,000 of revenues, better than budgeted. And our expenses, we anticipate, are maybe going to be about $400,000 below. Now, I will say that's about a $700,000 improvement from the budget. But as a reminder, we did budget a loss of $1.8 million in the general fund this year, which is something that is not something that we want to do. It's not in accordance with our ongoing policy, and something that we're trying to work out of for next year. So if we start with a base of $1.8 million, we're doing better than that, but we're still anticipating a loss there. And as we meet tomorrow on the budget, that's one of the things we're trying to work out of that position. MSTU fund, similar situation. We're right on budget there, about 75% in both areas. There's a little bit of a lag on the half-cent sales tax and the state revenue sharing, which is why we're a little below the 75% on revenues. However, the half-cent sales tax is gaining about $100,000 here. We're about $50,000 below on interest earnings, and we anticipate our expenses will be a couple $100,000 over, or a couple $100,000 under what's anticipated. So we may have a slight gain here, $100,000 or $200,000. Transportation fund is next. Revenues and expenses are both below, and that's due to the lag time. We're 1 month behind receiving the gas taxes and the transfers from the other funds. We anticipate maybe close to break even, maybe a moderate loss, but probably close to break even there in the transportation fund. Emergency Services District, once again, we're at 80.9% of the revenues, and that's because of ad valorem taxes being the largest revenue source. That's about 80% of the total revenues of the district, and expenses are at 70.8%, which falls largely with the salaries and benefits. This fund, more than any other, is dominated by salaries and benefits. As you know, all of our expenditures, the largest item is the cost of the staffing. It's just more true here in the Emergency Services District. We do have ALS revenues have held up better than we anticipated during the downturn. We thought there would be more no pays. However, we are continuing to get those funds from insurance companies and Medicare for the ALS. So we're up about $400,000 on ALS revenues. We anticipate expenses to maybe be about $100,000, maybe $200,000 below the budget. That's largely due to controlling overtime and just minimizing any of the operating expenses to the greatest extent possible. So that being said, we're maybe about $600,000 better than budget, but like in the general fund, the programmed use of fund balance was about $2.5 million here. So even if we're running $600,000 ahead of that, we're still going to experience a substantial loss, and we will be addressing those losses in next year's budget, hopefully, as we'll discuss more tomorrow night at the preliminary budget hearing. Next, building division. We've gone over these a little bit. SWID. I've covered that already a little bit. I will say we are doing better than anticipated slightly. However, we've got those situations in the general fund and MSTU that we're trying, or in the Emergency Services District, that we're trying to work away from, and we are, I think, approaching the halfway point of the hurricane season. Knock on wood. We've been fortunate so far, but they anticipate Umberto, which shouldn't impact us, but may become the first hurricane, and we do have a large portion of the hurricane season to go through still, which is one of the reasons we do hold the fund balances that we have, so that we're prepared for those events should they occur. With that being said, I'll turn over to any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Any questions?
Just one. Have we had the first installment receivable under the new franchise fee on the natural gas?
We have not seen a payment yet. I checked last week. If the ordinance, I think it became effective for the first full billing month following July. So I think we should be receiving that in the next couple of weeks here. But as of last week, we had not received a payment for that yet.
I'd like to point out, remember I mentioned the Department of Revenue, when the property appraiser and tax collector send their budget, they've never decreased it, they've always increased it. They didn't let us down again this year. They've never seen a budget that they don't think needs to be increased. So they increased both their budgets after they sent them to them. It's the craziest thing I've ever seen.
Who did that? Department of Rep? Say that again?
Department of Revenue, say they send, the property appraiser and tax collector send their budgets to Department of Revenue for review. They always increase them. I've never said, I don't know what the review means. I mean, is it a bonus system? I don't know what it is. But they reviewed them both and increased them. Every year they've done it. So I don't know why we even have them review it. It's in the state law, though. It's I have never seen anything like it in my life.
My question is, how do you feel about that, Joe?
I think they should be eliminated. That's all I think. Department of Revenue's that area should be eliminated.
Yeah.
If you've ever talked to them on the phone, it's. I'll reserve my comment. They're incompetent, I think, I guess.
That's a good reservation.
You could add that to our legislative priorities for next year.
Oh, shoot. I think we could read the comment. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Any further comment? Thank you, Mr. Brown. The next item on the agenda is the Utility Services Developer Agreement for the installation of additional gravity sewer lines in Ursuline Heights subdivision, Indian River County project number UCP 4100, memorandum dated August 20, 2013, found on pages 269 through 279. Good morning, Mr. Burke.
Good morning, Commissioners. For the record, Vincent Burke, Utility Services Director. Mr. and Mrs. Johnson here, and noted as a developer wanting to build a large house on the southern portion of the Indian River Lagoon. As part of this process, they applied for building permits. We found out that they were in close proximity to existing centralized water and wastewater services per our Connection County Matrix 91805. Staff recommended that they connect to the lift station in close proximity to their residence. If you take a look at Exhibit A, you'll also notice some benefiting properties in the vicinity of their proposed location. So staff worked with the developers, Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, to come up with a way to not only be able to implement infrastructure to serve the residents now, but also add additional infrastructure for future developments for the 4 additional properties in here. So what we're asking the Commission to do is to approve the developer's agreement that basically does a cost share, not only for the hydraulic capacity used by the Johnsons for their property here, but also to offset those costs that the Johnsons have paid up front for additional properties to connect at some time in the future. So part of the agreement is not only to approve the developer's agreement, but also to approve the recouping mechanism for the future properties, the 4 properties listed to the east of the Johnsons. At such time as when they connect, we will have them recoup those costs that we're entering in at this point. Any questions I can answer?
Move staff recommendation.
Second.
That's a motion by Commissioner Solari, seconded by Commissioner O'Brien. Any further discussion, gentlemen? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Burke. Gentlemen, how about we take a brief recess prior to going to the county attorney's matters? Thank you. Call back to order. The next item on the agenda is the county attorney matters. There are several. The first item on the county attorney matters is the City of Fellsmere Fire Marshal's Office memorandum dated August 30, 2013, found on pages 280 through 281. Counselor.
Mr. Chairman,
yes.
If I could, before we start that, during the break, it was brought to my attention that some residents from the aerodrome were here and would like to speak. And of course, that was the matter we passed on the consent agenda. So I don't know whether I would be inclined to if my colleagues are to give them the opportunity.
I have no challenge with that there. If they've taken the time to be here, would that be you ladies? Counselor, would you like to proceed with what you wish, or at this time can we allow the ladies the opportunity to speak?
I would be happy to go along with the Commission's wishes to let the ladies speak.
Counselor, thank you for yielding your time for our guests. Anything further?
Nope. Come on.
Ladies?
Good morning. My name is Fanny Hype. I live at Indian River Aerodrome. I have been a resident of the county for 26 years. And from time to time we have these meetings, and the last time we were here, I didn't know that I had an opportunity to speak. I thought it was all. So I would just like to take that opportunity now. Okay, I'm 78, my husband's 85. We're retired. We love Indian River County. We love the aerodrome. I do not need county to bring water in. I don't want the county to bring water in. And I can't afford to have the county bring water in. It's very plain and simple. I've had city water in a couple of places I've lived. I've lived in the Keys, went to the doctor with my daughter, and I asked the doctor, what's with this water? He says, well, Mrs. Hype, it's the only water you can chew, because there were sediments in the bottom, and that was the water we were given there. Went to North Miami Beach, and I needed a gas mask to bring the water up to my nose. It had so many chemicals in it. I'm not fond of water that is brought in. I love my well water. We have paid a lot of money to bring it in, to get it filtered, to get it perfect, and I love it. And I and a lot of my neighbors really don't want the water. The questionnaire that went out initially, I mean, it was such a simple thing that people say, oh yeah, well, we'll find out how much it'll cost, but it wasn't intended to really go as far as it did. However, it has, and you're taking steps. I would like to see that continue so that we can stop stressing about it, because it's brought a lot of tension, and a lot of neighbors that otherwise would just say, oh, hi. They don't say hi anymore. You know, so I hope we can get through this. And I thank you for your cooperation and your help.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for taking the time. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Irene Linton Smith. I also live at the Indian River Aerodrome, and I've been a resident of Indian River County for 45 years, 38 of them at the aerodrome. And I have to say, before moving to the aerodrome, we did not have wells. We had water provided by some municipal entity, and the water could not compare to the good water that we now have at Indian River Aerodrome. You had to put something on your nose to drink it. It was terrible. The taste was horrible. And I was constantly scraping residue from it off appliances. We do not have that problem at the aerodrome, and I want to be on record to say that I do not want water brought into the Indian River Aerodrome. We'd like to keep our own well water. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Luisa Mariani. I'm also a resident at Indian River Aerodrome, and I've been there for over 20 years. And we're very happy with our water. We have lots and lots of filters, and we take care of our system. And we do not want water county water brought in right now. Thank you.
I want to thank all of you to taking the time to speak before us, and I also want you to know that at any time, this is your forum. You can speak at any time. We ask that you participate in any future endeavors regarding your water, and I hope that you can attend if there's any further discussion. Your voices have been previously heard, and I believe that you were well represented by someone who did take the time to do a survey, a second survey, and I believe that it's been very helpful to staff in discussing their recommendation for any activity that should take place within the aerodrome. But I want to thank you today.
Mr. Chairman, yeah, I'd just like to tell Vincent not to take any of this personally.
Well, thank you, Commissioner
Yes,
Solari. I think I see a nod. It's been received. With that, and thank you for bringing that to our attention, Commissioner Davis. Now we'll turn it back over to you, Councilor. Thank you for yielding.
Thank you very much to the chair and to the entire commission. I just wanted to provide this item as an update. At the August 20th meeting, the director of the Emergency Services District had brought an item regarding the city of Fellsmere and their fire marshal and their review of plans and permits with consistency with the fire prevention code. At that August 20th meeting, it was the will of the commission that our staffs, both Mr. Dill and myself, and the staffs of the district and the city work together to resolve this issue. In an abundance of caution, I just raised an issue concerning the statute of limitations, and it was the will of this commission not to spend public dollars in fighting litigation, but instead to look to have our staffs work together. And to that extent, pursuant to the request of this board, I went to the city of Fellsmere to their meeting on September 5th. And at that meeting, the city council of the city of Fellsmere had essentially granted a 120-day waiver period for using the defense of the statute of limitations to provide 3 months after the October 1st for our staffs to work together to try to resolve this. So Mr. Dill and myself will be meeting soon, and I know that our staffs of the city and the Emergency Services District are communicating as we speak. So I just wanted to allow this item to give us an update in the event something happened at the city of Fellsmere that they didn't accept our request for the waiver, and thus our staffs are working together to resolve this issue.
Thank you, Councilor. The next item is the consideration for the purchase of surplus land, the former Indian River County Correctional Institute memorandum dated September 3rd, 2013, found on pages 282 to 284. Councilor.
Good morning, Commissioners. Bill DeBrawl on behalf of the County Attorney's Office. With the ongoing discussion of the possible purchase of the former Indian River Correctional Institute site, I had the opportunity to speak with the Division of State Lands concerning the 4 issues that were raised by the Commission at its last meeting of August 20th. As far as delaying any sort of action as far as moving this sale along, they're leaning on not doing anything like that. Their preference is to go along with offering it out for purchase by the public unless we express further interest in acquiring the property. They did, however, express some interest at obtaining some asbestos surveys and also a site assessment, environmental site assessment. If you take a look at let me bring that up. If you take a look, there are 30-some buildings that are at the site. Not all of them are pictured on your screen before you now. The 4 buildings that would be remaining and not be demolished in accordance with the appraisal would be the 2 residences, the maintenance garage, and the maintenance shed. That's number 17 and number 19. Those are the buildings that the appraiser said, in his opinion, would be most useful to the county as a purchase. The other buildings, the dormitories, the kitchen areas, the classrooms, things like that, the appraiser's opinion said that it would be of very little value and they should be demolished. Obviously, with any demolition that would occur out there, there would be a need for an asbestos survey. So they have contacted a good list of folks as far as an asbestos survey, and let me put that up on the document camera. And there you can see the range of values that they have assigned. They go everywhere from $11,000 all the way up to into the 40s and 50s. I think the high is $64,000. The thing that I would like to call your attention to there is that this is for both an ESA, an environmental site assessment, and also the asbestos services, the asbestos surveys. You can see that there is a number of days listed for the environmental assessment and also a number of days for completion of the asbestos surveys. I got this information in last night, and I apologize that it's a little tough to squint out here on the overhead, but this came in at about 5:15 last night. And the other thing is that I would call to your attention are the number of samples that would be taken. If you take a look at the difference in pricing and the difference in samples, that's where you come into that explains the different number of prices and the wide range in prices, almost $50,000 that we're looking at here. The number of samples on the $10,000 and $11,000 bids are quite low, and you get into the hundreds of samples, even the thousands, with 1150 samples on the Professional Services Industries Incorporated bid. So what the Division of State Lands, I think, is willing to do in this case, if the county wants to go ahead with the purchase, we're going to have to get something like this done anyway. They would ask us to go ahead and pay for the environmental site assessment and also the asbestos evaluation. They would be agreeable to a reduction in the purchase price, a credit, if you will, if asbestos is discovered on the property. But their desire is to try and move forward with this. So if there are any other questions that I could answer, I'd be happy to give it a shot.
Can you repeat that, the last part you said? If asbestos is found, correct, they would look at a credit for the cost of the discovery of the asbestos, but not the removal?
The removal.
Okay.
It would be a removal, yes.
Okay. Which, depending on how much there is, could be hypothetically higher than the cost of the asking price of the property. I mean, that would be an extreme, but
I don't know anything about the costs of remediating asbestos, so I suppose it could happen. I don't know how much it costs to treat asbestos any differently than any other T&D.
And then would this also include the water samples to address the lake question that came up?
No, that would require a more stringent evaluation with testing that would be done at our expense. They would not go ahead and agree for any sort of phase 2 or special testing that we discussed last time.
From a staff perspective, I've checked with all my department heads. We really don't have any. We think this because of the number of buildings and the cost to demolish them if we were to purchase, we don't really have any interest in this property from a staff perspective. We've looked at it. We just think that we'd have to spend a fortune demolishing all those buildings and removing them. A lot more than the purchase price. So we don't, and also the ongoing maintenance out there. So we don't think it's worth it. Now the sheriff has expressed an interest only from a gun range standpoint, but we have no interest in it. We think it's a lot of money. We think we'd spend about 2 to 3 times the amount removing the structures out there, and you'd have to. They're in bad shape.
And I tried to quantify, looking at the southeast corner of Oslo 95, if the interchange came through, and how much, with the realignment of 82nd Avenue, how much of that county-owned or controlled land that's north of the landfill that we purchased the truss plant that was down there. I think the county bought that a number of years ago, that land, and then raised that building and put it vacant. Do we own all the way to the corner, or is there private property owners?
We own all the way to the corner.
I don't know.
If 82nd Avenue were to go across 95, and it literally would go across 95 immediately, pretty sure we own all the way to the corner. My question is, what is the underlying land use according to our comprehensive plan for this site?
This is currently agriculture.
This is on A1?
Yes.
And look at... it looks like roughly, if they put an interchange in, trying to look at some DOT sample interchange, that each corner, would potentially use up anywhere from 150 to 200 acres per corner to get the off-ramp, the water retention, the realignment of 82nd Avenue. So that's kind of looking at a balancing effect. If we lose that big of chunk of property, that's if they do like the clover leaf, where they like to maintain the higher off-ramp speeds coming off, so it makes the sweep longer and it burns up more land. But that's not an accurate number. That's just going through some, searching DOT interchange models on the internet and seeing different sizes. So, and actually that could be for all four sides. So maybe that number is less.
That makes much more sense, because if you a 40-acre parcel is a quarter mile square,
right?
Or it can be, and so.
So maybe that's more.
Yeah, you just jumped up to a more, a half mile.
Right.
That's big, but I'm. My question is then, if in the next step in this process, it gets offered to the public.
Correct.
And then somebody will have to make the decision. I'm assuming that this institution was placed there then as a special exception because it didn't go through a rezoning then, because it's in an A1.
It might have been. I don't even know when it was built. It might have been before 70.
So that's probably before our comp plan then.
That would be before
those were the good
zoning
laws.
laws.
Okay. All right.
And a couple other things that I just wanted to point out in the memo. As far as the interchange, we will probably hear from DOT on the interchange in spring. So delaying this matter until spring will not be something that the Division of State Lands would go along with. I think that was the other issue that was raised in the memo.
Where are we in permitting the northern portion of specifically the property that's directly south of Oslo Road, and I'm going to say the southeast quadrant of 82nd Avenue and Oslo Road, where we're in rezoning or in moving that land forward for the next phase of future landfill expansion. Ultimately, where I'm going with this is I'm wondering that with this property being zoned agricultural, this property being the prison site.
Right.
With it being zoned agricultural, the only way that we could make any property down there commercial would be if we were built out to a certain percent according to our comp plan. However, I'm pretty sure that that property that is at the southeast quadrant of 82nd Avenue and Oslo Road is zoned CI, and we could transfer those underlying land uses down to this site down there. But we'd be one of the only ones to be able to do that.
I think the other thing that you could rely on would be in a comp plan amendment would be a substantial change in circumstances. And I think you've got a pretty clear case that if you get an intersection from an interstate that's now added, that would be a significant change in circumstances that may warrant a comprehensive plan change.
Commissioner Solari.
At this point, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to suggest that maybe we just tell FDOT that they ought to consider this land. They may find it cheaper than what they can get in the future for the interchange, and that I'll make a motion that the county pass on any further efforts to purchase this property.
Second. For discussion, I believe that hearing that the cost factor involved in just identification, not knowing the full value of mitigation, coupled with the fact that I have heard from varying sources that there should be some concern about the pond. And in addition, the site also encompasses the range, which the state is required to do with their range as we have done with ours, and there is a combing process that is mandated. I don't know where that lies. That might also add to the cost factor if we were to utilize that property for other than a range. We would also have the mitigation of the lead in the berms as well. So I think that there's too many moving parts for our casual consideration, and I believe it deserves a deeper look by the state, and I think that they might find a better value for their land than we can as a county.
Just a question on the land use. If that's zoned ag, what's the old Calpine site zone that's past that where they're going to put in the power plant? What would that have been? That's more recent, so...
That would have probably been zoned ag also, and just have been a special exception.
Okay.
It very well may be. I don't know what the other underlying zoning on the other parcels might be.
Okay. Thank you. Any further, gentlemen? A motion by Commissioner Solari, seconded by myself. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you,
John.
Councilor. The next item on the agenda is the opposed resolution amending the designation of the code enforcement officers and the schedule of penalties and notification timeframes for code violations. Memorandum dated August 28, 2013, found on pages 285 through 293. Councilor.
Thank you to the chair and to the entire commission. As a follow-up to our meeting on August 20th, in which this board adopted a fertilizer ordinance, and in that ordinance, the Board of County Commissioners had designated a public works employee to be the official or the individual who would be responsible for education and enforcement. As we talked about that meeting, I had promised that I would bring an update to Resolution 92-59. This is a resolution adopted by this Board of County Commissioners, which establishes which code enforcement officers are responsible for enforcement of different portions of our code, plus establishes a fine schedule. This is that item. Essentially, we are recommending an amendment to the original Resolution 92-59, designating the stormwater education and enforcement and operations officer to be responsible for the fertilizer and maintenance portion of our new ordinance code, plus establishing fines ranging between $50 and $100 for various fines as suggested by staff. And with that, I turn it over to the board if you have any questions regarding this item.
Thank you, Councilor. Anything, gentlemen?
Just the only thing, Dylan, the fertilizer content and application violation and the grass clippings and debris violations are both at $50. I'd probably like to see those move up to $100, and just for simplicity's sake, that all the fines would be $100 except for the license violation, which is $500. I don't know if the rest of the board feels the same.
I'd rather go the other way, make them all 50. I mean, clearly it's not, I don't want to turn this into a red light camera situation where it turns into a revenue component. This is an education and for the first time offense. I mean, I don't want this to turn into a aha gotcha. I want it to be, that's why we're hiring the education component of this as much as the enforcement side of it.
I concur with Commissioner Davis, and I think the elevation of fines has not reduced the amount of traffic violators. I know if you speed through a school zone, you might be looking at $5,000 when it's all over.
Yeah,
Commissioner, you know. So with that in mind, you know, it used to be a $100 fine. I don't feel compelled to elevate the amount that is imposed. I believe we rather rely upon the educational value of what it stands for.
What about under the situation where a habitual repeat offender just keeps going, and I think it's...
I could go along with that, Commissioner. I mean,
right. It's something that might, not on the first, first offense should be a warning, education, second, a fine, but if they keep coming back over and over again, they're there 3 or 4 times, I think there maybe needs to be considered a step up after, if they're obviously disregarding the education and just doing what they want.
How about $50 for the first fine and $100 for every subsequent fine? for the whole list.
I'm amicable to something like that.
I like that.
If you want that in the form of a motion,
I believe we need one to go forward.
Go ahead and make that motion.
Second.
Is that for all of them, including the license and certification
No, the
violation?
license stays at the 500.
Okay.
It's for all of those, from the timing of fertilizer down to the grass clippings. It'll be $50 for the first offense and $100 for each and every subsequent offense.
So we still have a layer of progressive enforcement.
And people can't use the
Incident.
Incident.
So if they do it 5 times in the day?
Well, and I don't want it to be just a cost of doing business.
Right.
They figure, hey, I can do this all month long, and my odds of getting caught are 1 day out of 30, and it's $50,
And I'd be very
it's
happy
the cost
if-
of business are going to tack
If
in.
staff came across somebody who was doing that, if we needed to increase the fine, for the 10th offense and thereafter, I'd tell staff to come before us.
Okay. Thank you. Well, we have a motion by Commissioner Solari, seconded by myself. Any further discussion, gentlemen? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. The next item on attorney's matters is the rules and policies regarding reasonable opportunity to be heard per Senate Bill 50, memorandum dated August 30th, 2013, found on pages 294 through 298. Counselor.
To the Chair and to the Commission, sorry for clogging up your agenda today. We just had a couple items we wanted to move forward with.
Now, Alan used to do that all the time.
We do see Alan in the audience here. Citizen Polakowicz is here and present.
Should I bring too much for you guys to handle?
Can you please go to the podium and state your name?
This was the direction I got from Attorney Polakowicz, so I was following in his recommendation. Essentially, as you're probably aware by now, Senate Bill 50 was adopted by the Florida legislature this year. It goes into effect on October 1st. And what it requires is that there be a reasonable opportunity for the public to speak on items that will be coming before the board, various boards and commissions. What it states is that if your board or commission adopts rules and regulations regarding the public's opportunity to be heard, and you follow those rules, essentially a court will deem you in compliance with the law. So it's kind of a protective measure that boards and commissions will be adopting rules to govern these. And the rules that are that you can govern are essentially time limits, an opportunity for a representative to speak on behalf of a large group, just in case you have a large number of people show up. And you can also regulate or govern handing out forms to individuals that they can write their names down and indicate whether they oppose or support an item before you. What I have done is I've essentially taken a part of our code that talks about time limits, incorporated it into this resolution. I've made a statement that representatives could speak on behalf of a larger group. I haven't touched the issue about forms. It doesn't seem to be anything that our county is doing, so I did not address the issue, but if it's the will of this commission to go there, I'd be happy to follow up with that. Additionally, there are exemptions under the new law 286.0114. Essentially, these do not apply to ministerial issues such as you approving your minutes or proclamations that are consistently done. It doesn't apply to shade meetings, obviously. It doesn't apply to quasi-judicial items. Quasi-judicial items tend to have their own rules which need to be followed. And finally, it doesn't apply to emergency items. So I've drafted some rules and policies that would be adopted by a resolution. I've got that resolution before you. I've also, in the resolution, included a provision to encourage the other boards and committees of this county to adopt this. And finally, what I had asked for in my staff recommendation was the permission to hold a public hearing and advertise for an ordinance that essentially codifies these types of policies into our ordinance code. One, that just makes it more aware to the public, and two, by default, any rules of the county commission that are adopted in the code automatically apply to your commissions and boards. So by default, you would essentially have provided this law to apply to the other commissions and boards of the county. And with that, I turn it over to the commission for any questions.
Well, I guess we can put this right to the test when we do have a public hearing as the amount of people that come forward to speak before the commission. I think that we've had a great experience with our public in having a great relationship, in speaking before this commission. I think everyone could attest that they've had fair and equal opportunity. Today, again, was another testament when Commissioner Davis spotted somebody that wanted to speak, and we immediately put them on the agenda because it was an issue of concern, and they did take the time. I believe that the citizens have had an abundant opportunity to be able to speak before this commission, and I don't think that I've worked with more of a receptive and transparent group as a commission as a whole as to the embracement of input by the citizens. With that said, now, we have a ruling that we have to abide by, and I think that that's just seamless because I don't know if we need that regulation. We have to adhere, but I think that our approach has been nothing but embracing of this whole idea and concept. Gentlemen?
Yeah, I just think Dylan has put down here what the law kind of required, but as long as we still operate under chairman's rules, I don't see us deviating from what we've been doing. So with that, I'll go ahead and move staff recommendation.
Second.
And for discussion, it seems to me, and I'll ask Dylan this, as a practical matter, the only change we probably might want to consider is right before the consent agenda, before we vote for it, we just ask the public if there's anybody from the public who wants to speak on any matter in the consent agenda. I think adding that really goes the distance to address any concerns.
Point well taken. And would you like to
I'd be
that in your direction?
Glad to add that into the motion. Matter of fact, that's how the agenda for the Regional Planning Council reads, is there's public comment on consent agenda and then the consent agenda. So that would just be following that.
Just a
clarification. You have to amend the second on that as well, Council.
Well, I've already included in there the concept about the consent agenda, and what I'm hearing from the board is that we will bring back an ordinance, if that's how the board voted on it, that will include that type of provision concerning the consent agenda. So I wasn't sure if the vote was to amend the resolution or essentially direct staff as when it goes to draft the ordinance to be very clear about the consent agenda. That would be the only clarification I would request.
Okay. And if it so pleases the board, henceforth, most certainly would have no objection. I hope nobody else would in inserting an opportunity to speak before we move forward.
Just as far as order of operations on that, I mean, if it's something that's going to be pulled by a commissioner, then obviously they'd have opportunity to speak on that. So,
well, we can do it.
You would do that after we adopt the consent agenda or have a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Right.
And that would be the proper time because it'd be as amended or in its totem, and then we could go from there. If somebody stands up and says, well, I want to speak on M, and you pulled it, then it'd be the incumbent upon the chair to say, that discussion should take place whenever we're entertaining that motion.
Fine.
But, okay, what if somebody wants to speak on a consent item agenda that hasn't been pulled?
Then that's the time to do it right before we vote.
Okay.
So basically, there'd be a motion and a second to approve the agenda as amended.
Is there anybody that wishes to speak?
Anybody who wants to speak on any item that hasn't been pulled would then be coming up to the...
That would be the proper way to handle it.
There you go.
Speak.
But I don't see that happening. I mean, if somebody wants to speak about it, we're going to pull it for somebody. But future boneheaded commissions might not do that.
Generation from...
Yeah, exactly.
Well, let's protect the citizens from the event of that boneheaded future.
Absolutely.
You're safe now, folks, but we have to look out for you.
Have you heard the phrase "just cause" rule in the Florida statutes? That I was at a meeting, another governmental elected body meeting, and they had used the phrase, well, it's on the consent agenda. Unless you can show just cause why you want it removed to be discussed, you couldn't remove it. So I don't know if you're familiar with that term.
I'm familiar with the concept of just cause, but I've never seen it in the context of a consent agenda item. I think in my discussions with staff before I brought this to the commission, much along the lines of what I've heard today from the commission is we will be looking at coming up with a process by which we will be essentially asking the audience, does anyone have any questions or comments on any of the items that have not been pulled, and then made sure that those items are additionally pulled, and then you would vote on the consent agenda and then move forward with public comment and commission comment on the items that haven't been pulled. And I intend to incorporate that type of process into the ordinance.
I understand that happens at more protective boards or, I guess, organizations, school-type settings.
I've seen that there.
Broad scale. I have heard of it happening, and I've seen evidence.
This will be an improvement to those who want to participate in those types of meetings. They give them a better chance to discuss some of the items. Wonderful.
Oh, and I do want to add, Commissioner O'Brien rightly pointed out a small error, clerical error in the ordinance, which was my fault, and I will wrap into the resolution a small change that he had identified.
Any further discussion, gentlemen? On motion by Commissioner O'Brien, seconded by myself. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Councilor, thank you for your labors.
Thank you very much.
Next item on the agenda is the update of discussions of the City of Vero Beach City regarding water, wastewater services to unincorporated areas of the county. Memorandum dated August 1st, 2013, found on pages 299 through 303. Councilor.
To the Commission, I think consistent with how this memo was drafted, Mr. Plakwich had some comments as he was leaving and felt it would be helpful to address this board with regards to the communications and negotiations that he has had with the regards to the City of Vero Beach and their water and wastewater facilities. I certainly invite Mr. Plakwich to come forward and present any additional comments he may have to his resolution.
Councilor,
to his item.
We're thankful that you have encouraged a second legal opinion, if it's not consistent.
Good morning, gentlemen. Alan Plakwich, former county attorney, now stress-free resident of 1215 Marina Village Circle here in Vero Beach. I prepared this memo because it occurred to me as I was nearing my termination with the county that back in 2012, this board had asked me to engage in discussions with the City of Vero Beach staff relating to water sewer service in some of the unincorporated areas. And I had worked on that for roughly a year, and I felt it was important that I transfer it to this board in some form, and it turned out to be this memo, really what happened in those discussions, the outcome of those discussions, so you can decide from here where you want to go. By way of brief background, as you know, back in 1987, the County Commission entered into 2 franchise agreements with the City of Vero Beach to serve some unincorporated areas of the county, serve water and sewer. Those unincorporated areas are the South Barrier Island and some isolated areas adjacent to the city on the mainland. Those franchises are for 30 years. They will expire in March 2017, which, when you think about it, is only 3.5 years from now, which is not that far off. And the question has become what's going to happen with respect to service in those areas when those existing franchises expire. This board back in April 2011 passed a motion taking the position that the county will serve those areas starting in March 2017. However, the city doesn't necessarily agree with that position. So in any event, in 2012, this board said to me, Plakwich, go talk to the city and see what you can get out of this. And we did engage in some on-again, off-again discussions for roughly a year, primarily with the city manager. And through the early part of those discussions, I think we explored some ideas that were more global than isolated to that specific issue. We tried to find ways that perhaps the city and the county could cooperate, exchanging future capacities in lieu of either side building future infrastructure, things like that. But nothing ever really we were never able to come up with anything specific enough that led to any type of understanding or agreement on those types of approaches. In the end, the last discussion we had with the city manager in June, as I say in my memo, in my view, the city manager's position seemed to harden. And at that point, the city manager effectively said, the city is going to serve those areas. The city will not leave those areas unless ordered to by some court or unless they agree to because of some purchase of their infrastructure. And that the city would charge county rates in the unincorporated areas County rates, for the purposes of that position, were the regular county base rates plus a 6% what they called equalization charge. And I'll pause for a minute and say, over in Indian River Shores, where the city continues to provide water and sewer utility services, the city charges county rates plus a 6% equalization charge. Indian River Shores made the affirmative decision not to charge a franchise fee. So Indian River Shores is paying county rates plus 6%. So come back to our situation in the unincorporated areas. If the city charges county rates plus 6% equalization, and the county charges its customary 6% franchise fee, the residents in those areas will end up paying county rates plus 6%, which is more than county residents are paying in the unincorporated county, where it's county plus 6%, or in Indian River Shores, where it's county plus 6%. And basically, that was the city manager's position. Now, that left us in a little bit of a difficult situation, because if the city is basically taking the position we're not leaving at the end of 30 years unless we agree to or unless some court orders us to, then that puts the county really in the position of saying, well, okay, what are we going to do about that? Are we so insistent that we will serve those areas that we are prepared, for example, to initiate litigation against the city to answer the question of who has the right to serve those areas at the termination of these existing franchises? And on that issue, I'll just remind the board that back in 2011, we traded outside utility attorney opinions with the city, with the city's outside attorney saying that the city could stay in these areas as long as it wants, and the county's outside attorney saying, no, they can't. The county has the right to serve these areas at the end of 2017. So we have, as seems like it often happens in the legal world, we have conflicting legal opinions from supposed outside experts on that litigation question. So, number one, I wanted to bring to you the city's latest position, which is that they don't want to leave. This is the city manager's position now. They don't want to leave. They intend to keep serving. They're happy to agree with us to serve county rates and charge a 6% equalization charge. And if the county wants to charge its customary 6%, the city doesn't care. They'll collect it and send it to us. That's their basic position. My thoughts, which I also wanted to communicate to you, were, number one, we know it's the city manager's position. We don't know if it's the city council's position. So you start there. Do we really know whether the city council will agree or not agree to step aside so the county can serve those areas starting in 2017? And if you, as I say earlier, if you're insistent on the county serving those areas, then I suggest the next step you take is to approach the city council on exactly that question. If the city council doesn't change that position, then, and if you're still insistent on serving those areas, then you're left with the litigation route. From my standpoint, I was not enthusiastic about the litigation route, not because I thought our position was weak or strong, but mostly just because, really for two reasons. Well, I'll say for three reasons. Number one, I don't think the public has any appetite for litigation between the city and the county, both sides serving the public interest, both sides funded by taxpayer money. That, to me, is a failure of local governments trying to cooperate with each other, and it's not something that I thought was an attractive alternative. Number two, as I say in my memo, I firmly believe that consolidation is inevitable. We're in an evolutionary process here where 40, 50 years ago, the city was the population center. It provided the utility service, and the county was not populated, so it did not provide utility service. As we have evolved, that has changed. Population has expanded out into the unincorporated areas. The county has its own utility service, and at this point, the county's utility service is much larger than the city's utility service. It is extremely financially stable, and I think as that evolutionary process continues as we go forward, it is not going to make sense to have two separate, standalone, independent systems, duplicative of each other. That doesn't make any sense to me as a resident of the county. So I think inevitably there will be a consolidation. The only question is when. We approached consolidation with the city in the summer of 2011, and we didn't get very far at that time. I think they're just not ready for it yet. I think the city has not quite figured out how to live in the future without the what I'll call the profits that they're making off their electric utility and their water and sewer utility. But at some point, they're going to have to figure that out. And I think, therefore, consolidation is inevitable. And if you believe that consolidation is inevitable, then the idea of litigating today to reach a solution which may be inevitable in the not-too-distant future doesn't make any sense. And thirdly, you've got a geographical factor here that is simply a reality, particularly as it applies to the South Barrier Island. The geographical factor is the South Barrier Island is pretty much isolated from the county from a utility standpoint. You can't get to the South Barrier Island, the county can't, without going through the city. So the idea of the county trying to serve that area without some cooperative effort from the city is kind of a non-starter. It just doesn't work very well. So for those different reasons, I personally reached the conclusion that while it would be nice for the board, for the county to serve those areas now, it is probably makes sense, rather than litigation, rather than building infrastructure, it probably makes sense to let the city keep serving those areas for the time being, with the idea that eventually consolidation will render the issue moot. Now, if you agree that far in the process, then the question is, okay, what kind of rate structure will you see? Right now, in these unincorporated areas, and there is an error in one of my footnotes as I reread it today.
Yeah, I saw that.
Those residents in these unincorporated areas being served by the city are being charged city rates plus a 10% city surcharge plus a 6% county franchise fee. That's what they're paying today. If we move forward with the city's proposal, those citizens would be paying county rates, not city rates, but county rates plus 6% equalization plus 6% franchise fee from the county. I don't know, someone with more financial knowledge than I would have to analyze where that leaves them. My guess is their charges would probably go down under those different scenarios. But at the same time, they would be paying more money than the citizens in the unincorporated county who are paying county plus 6%, and the Indian River Shores people who are paying county rates plus 6%. So at least my feeling was if the city is going to continue to serve these people, I think there's a strong interest in trying to charge the citizens in these areas the same rates that county residents are paying and the same rates that Indian River Shores people are paying, which is county plus 6%. The only way you can arrive at that is by splitting that 6% down to 3%.
Can we legally do that with it being in, with us charging other utility customers 6? Can we cut it by 3 if they'll cut it by 3 to get it down to 6 legally?
Sure. I mean, the equalization charge, there really isn't much law on that. Yeah. You can charge an equalization charge whatever it takes to equalize.
Let me ask you this. In the event that, let's just suppose that we learned scientifically that we need to have sewer throughout the county, or just at least the Barrier Island or something like that. Now, where is that going to leave? I'm concerned about where that's going to leave the residents of the unincorporated area of the Barrier Island and their ability to take their frustrations out on this board versus the city council that they can't vote for. And even, I mean, it may be as a mandate, and if that's the case, that's a different situation. But I just don't know, as we go down and off into the future of this thing, the issue about not having the representation and being able to vote is going to be, in my opinion, could be extremely significant and extremely costly for those residents that don't have the opportunity to vote for or against.
I don't think the city can, for instance, if a lot of the areas outside of the on the South Beach do have sewer, like the moorings and some of the castaways that are out in the unincorporated area, they have sewer already. A lot of those subdivisions do.
Okay.
So they're already furnished. But I don't think the city's allowed to, we'd probably try and do an assessment project for something like that, but the city would need our okay. and we have to do the assessment. The city can't in the unincorporated area.
Could we address that in the contract? If we, that the determination of sewer would be at the county's responsibility?
Well, the answer, back during this process of discussion, I prepared a proposed agreement with the city continuing to serve and charging county rates plus the 6%, I'll say. And we addressed a number of issues, specifically the issue that Commissioner Davis raised, which was it still leaves these people with the so-called taxation without representation situation. And I put some paragraphs in there basically giving the citizens a mechanism to come and complain to this board. And if this board did receive complaints, then it could then go to transfer those to the city council. The city council was required to deal with them in certain ways. Now, in the draft that I prepared, when they sent it back to me, all that was crossed out, and we never got any further in those discussions. But at least in my view, it was an issue that needed to be addressed. And that was the only way that I could see it, through some type of dispute resolution mechanism that gave citizens the recourse to come here. And pretty much that agreement can address any issue that the other side agrees to. So would they agree? I don't know.
Well, given that, I mean, I think that I talk often with the South Beach Property Owners Association leadership and members, and my sense from them is that they'd be willing to accept basically what Mr. Polakowicz has outlined, in that they'd have county rates, and they'd be able to talk to us if rates were too high or too low. So I think for the most part, the residents of the South County would be comfortable with this. I'll just note, and this is neither here nor there, but the MAI consultants that the city used surely didn't help anything when they valued the city system, and I think that was just part of something which I won't go into any other detail, but that was, I think, something that derailed what could have been a very positive process.
That killed the discussion from a practical standpoint.
By design. And then I also believe clearly that right is on our side, and that this is a battle that we could fight and win, but I again agree with Attorney Polakowicz in that I don't think that it would serve the customers if we engage in this battle and spend a lot of time in litigation and fights. So I'd like to hear from the other commissioners, but I'd feel very comfortable basically going forward with this and letting the city council, and not to the city manager, going forward with this proposal to the city council and get their response for it, and if they are basically amenable to it, and that would include the 3%. So it's a total of 6%. And if they're comfortable with it, then go forward and tie this down.
Presently, we are getting the 6% from these residents, and I would just, I'd like to go with us getting the 6% and them not, us continue to get it, ask that first, the full 6, because it's a loss of income which we have to plug in, and we're trying to right now get our hands around how much that would be, because we don't have all the information. Just say that we'll charge our 6% franchise like we do all our residents' franchise fee for the use of the right-of-way.
I understand what you're saying, but I think ultimately I think the fair way was going to be to split it like, and that's assuming that the city goes along with it. They might just say, feel free for y'all to cut yours down to 0, and we'll keep ours at 6.
I prefer to put our best offer right out, and then if the city doesn't go with it, we have time to mount the fight, which is probably more political than it is actually litigation.
Let me ask a question of Mr. Polakowicz, if I may. We have a franchise agreement that's fixing to terminate. Is anything that we're talking about doing here putting us in a situation of weakness in the event that we do need the opportunity, or we do exercise the opportunity to litigate in making any decisions as far as saying, okay, we agree that this terminates and you own it? Are we saying that this terminates, you own it, and that y'all are right, y'all go ahead and run this as long as you want to, and even though the franchise agreement's expired?
In fact, in our discussions with the city manager, we actually were incorporating a a termination mechanism in the new agreement. In other words, I always wanted to bring some level of certainty. So what happens when this new agreement expires? And the city manager has been willing to have a provision in there saying we can, in effect, kick them out, for lack of a better word. That's not a good way to put it, but we can bring the arrangement to an end and we then serve that area in the future. They want some provision saying we will purchase the assets which they own. And we went round and round. I wanted to come up with a specific purchase formula so we didn't have to do that 15 years from now.
Yes.
He was unwilling to go there. He wanted to just have some general, in accordance with customary, something like that. Again, it started to derail. We never could reach agreement on that. I was at some point willing to go over to what he wanted to do, if that was the final point that would make it happen. But then things just kind of started changing, and as I say, his position hardened, and his position ended up being, you have to pay what we're willing to pay. You have to pay what we're willing to take, and if you're not prepared to pay that, then we're not going to agree to any termination at the end. So, it was unresolved in the end.
I don't know that necessarily answered my question, though, as far as will any decision that we're making here weaken a position of the franchise?
Yeah, clearly your discussions today, your proposals to the city would not weaken your legal position of whether you have a right to serve this area at the expiration of the existing franchise or not.
So let's suppose that we reach an agreement and then they change their mind on the agreement, they being the city.
Mm-hmm.
And we decide, okay, we're going to go back to our franchise and fight.
Yes. You have not weakened your position.
All right, just want to make sure.
Your position is what it is.
And when we do this, the only other provision I think we really need in there is clearly is if at any time the city of Vero Beach stops giving county rates and reverts to higher rates, then we have clear rights to take over service of that area, or those areas.
And the infrastructure.
Yeah, whatever strong paragraphs we can put in there. Because they don't want to have some agreement signed and everything, and then 2 years from now the city reverts to city rates, for instance.
And they could do that with just a vote, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to have a clear mechanism to, enforce the city, make sure that the city does give county rates going forward. Because again, I'm not quite sure that the city's really understood what these type of deals mean to them, not only Indian River Shores, but what this would mean in terms of revenues. And right now, we're expected, there's a good probability that we will actually reduce county rates 3 or 4 years out. And I'm quite sure that the city hasn't figured out how that will impact their systems. Mm-hmm. So I just want to make sure that the customers are protected. And I will note one other thing. It's my understanding of the current laws that the city can charge not just the 10% that they're charging now, but up to 50%. I mean, it's easy for them to up the charges to 25%, and a number of municipalities do that to customers outside the service area, which is one of the reasons why what we could be doing today would be giving the county customers more protection. I mean, I'd feel much better if we ensured that if something happened, if something unforeseen happened to the city of Vero Beach, that they couldn't just tack on this 25% or 50% surcharge.
And craft that as saying, well, yeah, that's a surcharge, that's not our rate.
Yeah, well, we have to make sure that they craft that they have no other charges in there that are in addition to what the county charges.
Right. And I think that the way, and I understand Mr. Baird's position on what we should just take this and keep our 6 and they take nothing, but in an effort to make it the same rate, the same amount as county customers, that we offer the 3 and 3, and I'd almost suggest that perhaps the language be that in the event that changes, this terminates the agreement and the infrastructure is reverts to the unincorporated area of the county, if we could get away with that.
Certainly, if they charge rates different than what the agreement requires that they charge, that's a breach of the contract.
Well, I'd like
So
to
then it becomes a
address
remedy
the,
issue.
the big issue about the infrastructure.
Yeah. The giant problem we had with the infrastructure is what exactly does the city own? I believe the city owns what they built, and they probably own anything for which they have a built that they didn't build, for which they have a bill of sale, but there are very few of those. And
but with it being an enterprise fund, I mean, does the logic not carry forward that it is also paid for by those that are using it, and those that are using it are the residents of unincorporated?
Our logic is that, but that's not the city's logic.
Oh yes, I mean, yeah, that's what I said in my memo. I've been making that argument from day one, particularly since they've been serving the area under a 30-year franchise going back to 1987. I'm sure they have recaptured any construction costs in the whatever it's been 27 years since that time. If they haven't, their rates are ridiculous. So I'm sure they have recovered their costs.
Is the city's utility an enterprise fund like ours is, or is it more of a general department function?
It's an enterprise fund.
Is it? Okay.
Most are. Which their general fund soaks for revenues.
Anything further? Councilor, thank you for returning to the podium as you promised you would, and fulfilling your commitment to where you are, realizing that retirement is a promotion. Thank you for remembering your humble upbringing.
And I will tell you all that the 60-day evaluation of Dylan that you've all asked me to prepare will be forthcoming. The short form is a few rookie mistakes, but otherwise doing a good job.
Well, thank you.
At this time, Mr. Chairman, I'd go ahead and make a motion to go ahead with Mr. Plackwood's recommendation that the city keep serving the unincorporated areas charging county rates, but with the city reducing its equalization fee to 3% and the county reducing its franchise fee to 3%. And as soon as Mr. Reingold is comfortable with that agreement, which also gives the county a couple of the safeguards which we discussed, that the appropriate people make a presentation to the city council.
So seconded.
I sure would like and I know it's not going to happen, but I sure would like the issue about who owns what if this doesn't stay if it doesn't stay.
Oh, we can ask the county attorney to put that in a paragraph, but I'm pretty sure that'll get kicked back. But we can. I'll be happy to amend the motion to include that in the paragraph. Okay. But again, I'm trying to make the best, cleanest offer. I think that's what Mr. Plackwood did, is to make what would be the county's best, cleanest offer so that the city council can see that and get an up or down and let us know as soon as possible what other path we needed to take.
All right.
Thank you. Well, on motion by Commissioner Solari, seconded by myself. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Well, that's about it for attorney matters.
I'm excited about traveling the city circuit, having gone to Fellsmere last week, and now I see myself going to Vero Beach in the near future.
Rosa, you've got to get him up to Sebastian.
I know.
You might want to have Mr. Plackwood hold off his 60-day his evaluation of you until he sees the fruits of your endeavors out there. Thank you. Next item is commission items. I did place something on the agenda, gentlemen, regarding the fertilizer ordinance, and I wanted your consideration and indulgence in looking at our municipalities within Indian River County. I want to commend the municipalities for going forward with fertilizer ordinances. They did them far earlier than we did, and they're to be commended for that. And I most certainly and humbly respect Home Rule and encourage them to continue to do positive things for the Indian River Lagoon. I do believe that this commission has set forth one of the most responsive and what promises to be the most effective manner in reducing the nutrients that are getting into the lagoon. With that said, I did have some concern about uniformity, consistency in education and awareness and I think there's even more of a chance for the distributors, the vendors, the big box stores to conform if we could encourage our municipalities to revisit their ordinances and just show these distributors that Indian River County and all the municipalities are on board, and I believe that this will have a greater impact in what we're attempting to accomplish in a clear and recovered lagoon. I also have some concern about the applicators, as I discussed. You know, when you're across the street from another municipality jurisdiction that has different rules, there might be some angst that can be ensued. So in brief, I supplied a letter which I would like to send forward to all the municipalities who have moved forward with an ordinance. In addition, it's my understanding that some of the municipalities have placed their ordinances on the agenda for further discussion, and I think that this is a very timely letter. So much so that if approved, I would like to move forward and have it emailed to all of the councils as well, collectively and independently.
Mr. Chairman, I'll be happy to move that we send you a letter with 3 enclosures, a copy of our ordinance, a copy of our bullet points in English, and a copy of our bullet points in Spanish, which I had discussed with Mr. Reingold a couple of days ago, so that they have all the materials they need to move forward.
So seconded, and thank you for making that motion, as I cannot. Motion made by Commissioner Solari, seconded by myself. Any further discussion, gentlemen?
Just one correction. In your first paragraph, you say that the county ordinance will be applicable to all of Indian River County except within the limits of any city which has adopted its own ordinance. Our ordinance is only effective in the unincorporated county, whether a city has adopted an ordinance or not. So I would just change that to say this is applicable to unincorporated Indian River County.
I'll change my motion to that.
Council?
The applicability section is that this chapter shall be applicable to and shall regulate any and all applicators of fertilizer and areas of application of fertilizer within the area of Indian River County, unless there's an exemption, provided, however, that this chapter shall not apply within the limits of any municipality which has adopted an ordinance regulating the same manner or the same subject matter. So I read that to mean that if nobody's adopted it, we then stand in their shoes. If they've adopted an ordinance, then their ordinance plays or
So if the city hasn't adopted an ordinance, you're saying that our ordinance is effective within the city limits?
That is correct.
Well, that by default puts us enforcing enforcement of it, right? I don't know that we want to go there.
Yeah, and legally, can we do that?
Well, it certainly is our county powers. We have the right to have our ordinance there until there's a conflict in the ordinances. I think the concept was, as I saw it, was essentially as a placeholder until they meet the requirements of the Florida statutes. Florida statutes essentially say that local governments, both the counties and the municipalities, are required to adopt ordinances. So I would still look at them as their responsibility to still meet the statutory requirements. But that's how the ordinance stands today. I'd be happy to entertain any changes to that.
No, I like Wesley's saying I don't want us to start imposing things in areas which we haven't imposed them in the future.
So it would be basically unincorporated areos of the county?
Correct.
Yes. Where I'd like to stay.
That's where I'd like to stay, too.
I actually like living in the city of Vero Beach, but, well, go along.
Do you have to fertilize those rocks?
No, don't.
No, but they won't grow. They'll turn green with lichens and mold, but...
Yeah, that's still growth. What do you have against lichens and mold?
Look, if it works for you, it works for all of us.
Yeah, a beautiful yard of lichens and mold. I can see it already.
Go play on the rocks. No.
To the chair and to the entire commission, consistent with what I'm hearing from the commission, would you like the county attorney's office to adopt an amendment clarifying that one provision in here that essentially it applies only in the incorporated areas?
Yes.
I would feel more comfortable, and I think the cities would be more comfortable, too, that we're not trying to overstep.
What I can do is I can work to get a public hearing item and notice up. I believe I can get it on the agenda for next week meeting in terms of it's just announced as a noticed item, and then have it bring forth on the October 1st meeting. Our fertilizer ordinance goes into effect on October 14th, so I believe we'd be able to time that up so that it lines up well. But if that's the direction of the board, I'll be happy to go in that direction.
And I'm glad this discussion ensued, as I'm sure that if we do have passage of this document to go forward, that it will be far more embraced by the municipalities as well. Mr. Moore, are you waiting for the next item?
No, sir.
You want it on this one? Come on in.
Chris Moore, Public Works Director. I just wanted to make a point to legal. Is you read under the applicability section under enforcement. It's silent on the issue of enforcement in the unincorporated area or in the city. I'm assuming that we would also put in there that enforcement would only be in the unincorporated areas.
That's my intent.
Yeah, I mean, that's essentially what it's saying in 316, to Mr. Moore's point. 316.15 essentially says everything above here, this is where it's applied. So if we had just the applicability for portion, that resolves your issue about the enforcement.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, so your motion is slightly amended, Commissioner Solari?
Absolutely.
Okay, and second so. And the recommended changes on the letter? I don't know if they...
The recommended changes reflect Commissioner O'Brien's and Commissioner Davis's views there, so that we are basically limiting ourselves to the unincorporated area, and that we will have enforcement only in the unincorporated area, and that we have those enclosures. The modified ordinance and the bullet points in English and Spanish, and if you don't have the Spanish ready, it can be when it's ready, but just to make that as easy and simple for the municipalities,
and
to avoid any duplication.
And the second is so amended. I just wanted you to know that the letter of intent was an ask, not a tell, but most certainly...
Absolutely, I took it to be an ask.
Okay,
just
an ask.
I absolutely took that as not anything coercive on the municipalities, just to inform the municipalities clearly of what we've done, and a suggestion that if we were all in the same boat, we'd all row together.
Mm-hmm. And I think that might be coming about, and the choice of verbiage was on the legal foundation of what our responsibility
I think we all understand that.
Existed. I just wanted it to be clear that nobody was saying that we should go in there and enforce where we should not. I see there's a few people that expressed a desire to speak about this. I understand they might be attending some council meetings at the near future.
Bob Bruce, 12396 Highway A1A. I would ask you to get this letter out ASAP. Tomorrow night is Sebastian's meeting, and it would probably be reasonable for them to see this letter before that meeting.
You have my commitment, if it's so passed, and it sounds like it will be, that the English and Spanish version will be accomplished today, and it will be out in the mail today, and they will receive it today. Council, yes, I'll be happy to ensure that gets accomplished, and I will work very directly with you.
Two of those three things I can accomplish. One of them, the Spanish, I'm not so sure I can do on my own.
And I assure you that the Spanish-English translation will be accomplished by the end of this business day.
Thank you very much. I think the county needs to be consistent. That's the entire county here. So.
Thank you, Mr. Bruce, for your comment.
Can I just
Go ahead, Dan.
I'm Dan Lamson, and I just want to go back and say that everything Bob said is basically our position as well. And it's a great letter, and we're very happy that you're doing it, and that it's going to go out. And I think it could be a great help in unifying all the municipalities in the area. So thank you.
Thank you, Dan. With nothing further?
Yeah. The Chair and the Commission, just looking at the letter really quickly, I think what might just be easiest is to just strike that second sentence of the first paragraph and combine the two paragraphs into one, and essentially says, look, we adopted an ordinance and we encourage you to do a similar manner. I think that might resolve the issue quickly and efficiently, but I'd look to you for direction.
Okay. That sounds well.
However you rewrite it, basically it's the tone of a humble suggestion, and no more.
Well, all right, we'll take that not only under advisement, that letter will be restructured and sent out today. Thank you for your support, gentlemen. Well, I shouldn't before the vote.
Not sure.
Motion made by Commissioner Solari, seconded by myself. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried unanimously. Thank you, gentlemen. Next item on the agenda is, under Commissioner Matters, is Commissioner Peter O'Brien has an update on the Indian River Lagoon Action Plan for Indian River Lagoon, memorandum dated September 3rd, 2013, found on page 306. Commissioner O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to take this opportunity just to update the board on some of the activities that we're undertaking so that we're all kind of on the same page based upon the action plan that the board approved last month. One of the items was to make sure that we have educational efforts for the governor and legislature so they know the importance of the lagoon. Senator Negron has taken that challenge. He's formed a Senate Select Committee that met in front of about 300 people a couple weeks ago down in Stewart. And the governor has visited the area a couple times and pledged funds. One concern is a lot of that attention is focused on the southern lagoon with the Lake Okeechobee issues, and we need to just make sure that they are aware that the northern lagoon has some issues as well. We approved the oyster bed pilot project, and we have received the Army Corps and the DEP permits. The consultants are currently stockpiling the material, and they hope to have the oyster bed installed by the end of September. One little anecdotal story is they were out putting the PVC pipes in to mark the location of the future reef, and as soon as they pulled away on the boat, a fisherman came up, tied up to one of the pilings and started fishing there. And they went back and said, "What are you doing?" And the guy kind of got agitated. He says, "Hey, I know you guys are putting a reef in here, and I have the right to fish here." And he said, "Well, we haven't put the reef in yet." And already the fishermen are attracted to it. So the word got out, and I guess they're looking forward to that. One of the things was looking at installing baffle boxes on the DOT outfalls. St. John's has a program that has a consultant that will working through St. John's and the county and DOT, identify potential outfalls for remediation projects. So that is ongoing as we are speaking here. Once I've identified some and have kind of a scope of the total project, they will be coming back before the board for a commitment letter to move forward with that. We are running into an issue, though. One of the things we found out that DOT had already started looking at clearing some of these ditches, and they're running into some mitigation issues because of mangrove intrusion into these drainage ditches, and then St. John's is telling them they have to mitigate for that. So they've run into a little glitch.
Can't get a
Go
permit.
figure that one, Commissioner Davis.
Yeah.
I'm sure you're surprised on that one. Expedite the construction of the South County algal scrubber. That is progressing, and we had a couple items on today's consent agenda moving that forward. Same with the fertilizer ordinance and the enforcement position. We're moving forward on those. We've approved a couple pilot projects to run new sewer lines to Summer Place and the City of Sebastian on the east side of US 1, so those are moving forward. I did have a meeting with the City of Vero Beach manager and their marina manager, and we reviewed their marina pump-out procedures, and they seem to be right on top of that. So that was kind of one of the things that may have had some potential, but I think the city's doing a very good job on that, and they're monitoring that pretty carefully. And we also talked about the expansion of the Spoonbill Marsh project with Grand Harbor, and we have approved a preliminary plan and analysis to move that forward, so that's moving forward as well. One thing that wasn't on the action plan, but Commissioner Ed Fielding from Martin County has put together a Indian River Lagoon Counties Collaborative seeking one commissioner from each county along the lagoon. So we have representation from Volusia, all the way down to Palm Beach County. We have our first, and I'll be representing Indian River County on that collaborative, and we have our first meeting Friday down in St. Lucie County, so I'll keep the board posted as things unfold with that group. And Mr. Chairman, that was just a brief update on where we are and what we're doing on the Lagoon Action Plan.
You did good under 5 minutes with a lot of input. Thank you. Next item is Connect for Kids, 211 Family Resource Guide.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is just to update the community. United Way and Connected for Kids have put out this guide through 211 as an information resource. It is full of about everything you would ever need to know, from affordable housing to homeless assistance, food assistance, education, early childhood development, substance abuse. And the 211 has just become a fantastic resource for the community, and now they have it all put out in this nice little brochure. I've put some out on the front reception desk, and if people need more, we can either get them here or go by the United Way and get them. But it's a great resource, particularly for families that are struggling and looking for resources for help. So the 211 Family Resource Guide, Connected for Kids, is available and out there for people to use. And I'll just go ahead, Mr. Chairman, to my next item.
Oh, did you want to
Unless
speak?
there's...
Commissioner Bryan,
yes,
I'm curious that someone wants to speak.
Good morning, Althea McKenzie, 4876 30th Avenue. Just wanted to mention that the Connected for Kids met with a group, Claudia Jimenez and Dr. Warrior, our co-chairs for that organization, and we went through the listing with Castle and myself. One of the things that we noticed in putting that guide together is that we were able to break it down based on basic needs, from basic needs to food to shelter to mental health and substance abuse, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's supposed to be a great resource for families. And there is considerable amount of resources available for prenatal care, preschoolers. However, when we studied across the board, the county, and it wasn't one specific area, ages 13 through 19 had very little, if not any, support services for that age group, and that was countywide. And I know this is a side segue, but I don't know what forums address that issue. But ages 13 through 19 don't even have a crisis line to call into. So if they had issues or problems or needed help, if they were hungry, if they were being displaced, if they, I believe there's 2 agencies that might address teen pregnancy. But what happens with 13 through 19, as everybody here who has gray hair and also has a teenager knows, they do not come to their parents and they do not go to their pastors. They will rely on friends, but if your friends don't have resources, then your choices are very limited. So the reason I'm speaking to this is that we have also identified issues in our community where I live, which is in Gifford, that age group 13 through 19 has the most limited resources in the county, more so than any other group, whether they be senior, children, or so forth. And it would be a benefit for the community, whether it be even within the school district, to form some type of partnership to start looking at that closely. I know Connected for Kids is very interested in identifying those support groups and trying to get that support out to teenagers. But looking at that guide specifically, our 13 to 19-year-olds do not have a resource. And even a hotline would be nice, just for them to call, I'm stressed at school, or I'm thinking about doing something that might not be good for me, and see if there are any community partners that would be interested in helping with that. So thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Commissioner Bryan?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Next item.
Next item is kind of a challenge to the board and the county attorney and county administrator. As you all will remember, last March, some of us stepped up and volunteered to have our heads shaved in support of childhood cancer.
And it looks like you still are.
And this is an opportunity to support Safe Space with their Walk a Mile in Her Shoes campaign. And I gave everybody a flyer here. It's Real Men Step Up, and it's wearing the red shoes. And there'll be 2 opportunities for you all to participate, particularly the 2 commissioners that did not shave their heads. This is your chance to atone yourself. We will be reading a proclamation for Safe Space on October 1st, and I challenged the dais up here to wear red shoes with me on October 1st when we read the proclamation. And then on October 26th, and we even really made this easy for you, it's going to be inside the mall, so you don't have to worry about heat or weather, but that's the Walk a Mile in Her Shoes event, Saturday, October 26th from 10:30 to 12:30. And I have registration forms here if anybody would like to sign up and join me in that challenge. So
I certainly have no problem in assuming that I don't know what I'm doing in October yet, but certainly would. And just, unlike the other events that y'all partake in, you don't have to worry about filling out the forms, as far as a gift from the St. Baldrick's Foundation for that free haircut that y'all did receive, since you wear your hair that way already. So.
I just have. But now, Commissioner, now that you brought that up there, does that mean that the 2 did not participate in the St. Baldrick's efforts? Will they have to wear the red shoes and shave, or?
I'm only asking for red shoes.
You just asked for red shoes?
I'm trying to keep it simple for them.
And these are these stiletto heels, demi heels, or they're flats?
I prefer wedges. Thank you. It's what I wear at home.
They prefer a heel. Okay.
Peter, do you have any extras that I can use?
No, I don't, but I'm sure they will supply them with you, because on the registration form is your shoe size. So
yeah, he's got a green pair, but none red.
Yeah.
He's got nice green heels.
Yeah. And I will say, although don't take it the wrong way, at the Republican barbecue on Saturday, Commissioner Fleischer showed me his calves, because I told him he should wear shorts with the red shoes, and he showed me his calves. I think it's more appropriate if he wears long pants.
Yes,
it wasn't pretty, but
that's why I showed them to you. They are not exactly appealing. They were
and just
well-worked calves.
It does. It's in support of Safe Space, where the women that are in an abusive situation or battered, it's a safe spot for them to go and get their lives back in order. So it's a great organization. A few years ago, I was on a United Way committee, and we went to tour the facility, and it's kind of like, they have to blindfold you and take you in there in secret, because the location is only known to law enforcement. And it's really impressive what they do, and the need in our community for a safe place for these women to go. So it's a great cause and doing a good thing. So.
Well, yes, and fortunately or unfortunately, I've had the occasion to cross the paths with Safe Space, and it is an extremely worthwhile cause and a very important one. I wish we did not need a Safe Space, but we do, folks, and we're glad they're there and easily supportable. So that's you're asking us to wear the red heels on October 1st.
And October 26th, the Walk the Mile.
And October.
Red heels.
Proclamation's the first. The walk
red heels.
Is the.
What? Do you have any special red shoes, Counselor?
You'll be there.
Oh, okay. Let's keep it on point. Thank you. Any further comments about the heels?
No, size 13.5.
Well, we'll be able to fill out the form. And thank you for providing them, Commissioner O'Brien.
There you go.
As they're being distributed. And finally, the implementation of the new fertilizer ordinance.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Last week I went around to a few of the retailers and distributors of residential fertilizers to talk to them about our ordinance. It's kind of a mix of responses. I did talk to a manager at one of the big box stores. He was, totally unaware that we had passed the ordinance, and when I kind of asked how they were going to go about implementing it as it became effective October 14th or 15th in their inventory, and he kind of really basically had I'd call a lackluster response. He just said, oh, well, corporate will tell us what to do, and, I'm not going to worry about it. So I was a little disappointed in their response. I did go down and talk to the local Ace Hardware down off Oslo, and they totally different response. They started taking notes. The manager in charge of that gave me a call back. We had a discussion. He asked for our summary of the bullet points that the attorney has put together. He was meeting with their fertilizer distributors to work on this. So they were taking a very proactive approach and really responding to it. And then my big concern, really, I guess, is right down the road here, the John Deere landscapers. They supply almost every commercial landscape operation here in the county with the fertilizer. And their concern was they have about 100 tons of product in their warehouse that will basically be out of compliance come October 14th. And the thing that's hurting them the most is the 50% requirement on the nitrogen to be slow release. What's interesting talking to them is they formulate their own product and label it and sell it. They formulate it at a 50% slow release formulation. So at their plant, they are making it 50%, which I think is good. But they realize that during transportation and shipping and handling, some of that encapsulation can break. And because if the Department of Environmental Protection were to pull a bag and sample it, and if they had labeled it as 50% and the sample came back 40% due to breakage, they get a huge fine. So to be conservative, even though they're manufacturing it at 50%, they're labeling it at about 30 to 35% to give them some buffer in case they get a sample taken and don't want to be fined. So they have 100 tons of product that in about a month will be out of compliance. And they're willing, to work with us, and in the future they're going to formulate product at 70% encapsulation, so that with breakage they can still feel confident to label it at 50% and not worry about it. But their concern is they have 100 tons in the warehouse, and the the unfunded mandate it would put on them to have to move that product out or do something with it. So I've been a little torn on this issue. I think because they do supply all of the commercial guys in the county with the product, I think it's important that we try to make sure that whatever they're doing is the correct thing and is working for us. On the other hand, we pass the ordinance to make sure that the bad nutrients and stuff don't get into the lagoon. So I'm bringing it up for the board discussion, and I've kind of come up with three options of how to handle it with them. And the first one is to do nothing. Go ahead and let the ordinance take effect on October 14th or thereabout. Basically, we'd be telling them, hey, it may be an unfunded mandate, but that's the way it is. It kicks in on the 14th. They might still be able to move some product in the cities that haven't updated their ordinance like we have, but after, again, Commissioner Fletcher's letter, those options may be taken away if the other cities come around. So they would be stuck with a considerable amount of product that would be out of compliance and a kind of an unfunded mandate to them. The second option is I asked them their shipping costs. They said about $50 a ton. So I guess one option we could consider would be to reimburse them to ship it to other counties in the state that don't have an ordinance. That would be a cost of about $5,000, which, to get rid of 100 tons of fertilizer, may be the cheapest pound of nitrogen we can get rid of. True. So it'll eliminate the problem, but it may open the door to other people coming in and saying, well, hey, I want you to pay for our shipping costs. So that might open a door and have some unintended consequences.
Did they say how long it would take them to go through 100 tons?
They asked to delay the implementation until June 1st. I've talked to some of the environmental folks that were supportive of the ordinance. They were kind of saying 3 months, but really that only takes us through the winter months, and I don't think they would be moving much product November, December, January. So they would really need until the spring cycle to move most of it. So they said, if we could go till June 1st, we would be happy with that. And then they would have their new formulation coming in that would be labeled at 50%.
And I gotta even a quarter pounder has a little asterisk beside it that says, pre-cooked weight.
Right.
So, as far as going to the fertilizer bag and understanding that shipping, things are going to break down, the most efficient and effective way, whenever they label that, is going to be at the factory or at the plant, not coming directly out of the bag.
At manufacture.
As far as please don't let this grow into something where we're going out there and saying, aha, I got you, you had a quarter of a bag that wasn't quite 50%.
But we're not.
No,
but DEP
that's my point.
looks at it that way, right?
That's my point.
Right.
So, I would just assume us being in the situation of this is when it left the plant, it was at 50%, and it being a bulk mix of some kind, there is a chance that at the corner of a bag, that when you take a sample of it, that it doesn't meet the 50% rule.
Right, but I think for us to have these guys in compliance, we're going to have to look at the label, and the label will have to show it to be 50%.
And I'm good with that. But that's based on
what I'm saying is the 100 tons they have, the label is only showing about 35%.
Okay. I thought you meant that whenever they do whenever they ship it from the plant, it says 50%, and then whenever they get it there and you pull some out of the bag due to the fact that some of the coat has
right.
coating.
No, their label is 30 to 35%.
Okay. All right.
But the future stuff, they'll label at 50.
Okay.
Because they're making it at 70 to account for some breakage.
That's it.
Okay, so what the problem is 100 tons they got that's labeled at 30 to 33, 35%. So my other option, because a lot of the other nitrogen products out there and the retailers generally is only about 1% slow release nitrogen. It's all urea, and it hits and it's gone. So one option I thought that would kind of maybe strike a balance is if we could modify the ordinance that would basically say effective October 14th or whenever the effective date the attorney tells us is, that all nitrogen products would require 25% slow release. And then as of June 1st, all products would require 50% slow release.
Second.
And just real quickly, what that does is it takes the 1% stuff out.
Right.
Kind of helps these guys, and I think they're over 25%. They're in the 30%. So I think we're getting the slow release we want.
My concern is here. We're tweaking an ordinance for one corporation.
Right.
Yeah, but they service every commercial guy in the county.
And I understand that, but okay. But what about those that service just about every individual in the county that fertilizes? You've got. I'm looking at this and I'm wondering, okay, so we're going to basically say, okay, y'all can go ahead and move forward with the inventory that you have, but because y'all don't sell commercially, y'all sell to individuals retail, pack it up and get it out of the county quick.
Well, two things to that. I don't
You're going to buy it differently.
Yeah.
I think that from what I haven't looked lately, obviously because of all the rocks in my yard, but a year ago, they'd already been moving to a lot of slow release in the big boxes.
Well, what did you find?
I found most of it's like 1%.
And how does it go off again? How'd you say? Bam?
The rest of it goes off, yeah.
Yeah, but we want to get rid of that anyway very quickly. And the other thing is, I think that the big box stores have a much better chance to move their inventory faster. They don't keep as much as the 100 tons on site, and that they have ability to move it to other locations faster if they want to. So I think this is as good a compromise as we can get.
I think this is just the first of many the more we look into this.
I have a fear of getting into the private sector business, and I have some.
Well, we're getting into it October 14th.
Yeah.
Okay, we're getting into everybody's business. Okay, realize that. October 14th, we're slapping a big unfunded mandate on everybody.
Very well put.
Okay? I mean, that's...
That vote was last week.
Yeah, that vote was last week. So we're already getting everybody's business. What I'm trying to work out is how do we, because we all know how we feel on unfunded mandates when they're passed down to us, and is this a way to try to achieve what we want, is to remove the fast-release nitrogen from as soon as we can, but find a way to segue into the 50% where it's not an undue burden on a business.
Let me ask you this. It's illegal to, not illegal to sell it, but illegal to use it, right?
Correct.
Okay. I say, I mean, I'd be more than happy to accommodate this up to a certain extent, but basically what we're fixing to do is impose this on the people of Indian River County that have the opportunity to vote for or against us based on that. So,
I'm sorry, could you say that again?
I mean, this is going to the people of Indian River County, this ordinance. So as far as targeting, it's not illegal for them to still sell that 1% ban.
That's correct. You could walk into the big box, buy a bag, and they can sell it to you all day long.
Then you just got to worry about your neighbors and their iPhone videotaping you and sending you to
And keep in mind, at least from what I heard from a number of the environmentalists, including the woman from the Marine Resource Center, is that the worst offenders were the landscape people putting it out. So if Commissioner O'Brien is right and this group serves the landscapers, then we immediately take care of that problem, or near immediately take care of that problem.
I think you're making my point, though, that the landscapers weren't due to the fact that they're already using in advance of the ordinance a slow release. So I think it's the other way around, but still.
But,
go ahead.
But again, I'm just saying from what the environmentalists said,
oh, okay.
they were. So at least from the information that the environmentalists get us, this addresses a significant amount of the problem very quickly. You're also going to it's going to change the cost to some degree to the fertilizer company, because slow release is more expensive than the other fertilizer. So this will give that distributor a chance to talk to the landscapers and let them understand what is happening. So that furthers the education portion. So I just think that in the real world, this is what Commissioner O'Brien has come up with is a good, workable solution.
I think it weakens our efforts immediately.
I don't think it weakens the efforts at all. I mean,
it slows the response that we anticipate by having an ordinance.
It slows the response during the season where everybody says you're not getting that much of a problem. And this means they're going to put out this fertilizer in that March to May period when it's most likely to be taken up in a safe, effective manner with the least chance of runoff, because historically we get the least rains in that period. So again, I think Commissioner O'Brien ought to be commended for this in taking a realistic approach to make sure that we're not doing more damage to people in the environment than we otherwise could have.
I'll make a motion that we do this, and we, in the minutes, say that Commissioner O'Brien should be commended for this.
Oh.
Yeah, okay, I want that.
Thank you.
I'll second that so that it's specifically in the minutes that Commissioner O'Brien is commended.
There you go. I've never made a motion like that, so good job.
Well, we're going to have to pull that one back because there was already a standing motion on the floor, and you being such an aficionado of Robert's rules, you would have to invoke the regulations.
I amend my motion to reflect that.
You want to include what Commissioner
absolutely
throw in there.
Okay.
And Commissioner O'Brien, you're happy with your original
Wherever
motion?
I am on the pecking order, I'm happy. Yeah.
You'll take a compliment where you can get it.
Exactly.
And Commissioner Zorc, did you have any input on this?
On the dates, they're looking for till June 1st.
You know, it could be May 1st or something. Commissioner, I just want to just give them a couple months
right. No,
of warmer
agree.
weather. So, I'm not hard and fast on June 1st. It just made sense because that would tie in with the blackout window.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. That's fine.
It gives it the I agree with.
It just ties in with the blackout window. Or it should say, beginning June 1st, 50% or greater. Yeah.
But then you can't use it until September 30.
Right.
So we might as well go ahead and make it to September 30.
No.
Oh, that's confusing.
We're talking about 8 months, though.
Not an ordinance.
I just think this is a heck of a slowing down period for an ordinance that is moving forward. We're talking about 8 months. We might as well just say, just use what you got, guys.
Commissioner, it's achieving what we want. It's to get rid of all the quick release stuff, and it's not putting an undue burden on a business.
And the fact is, even law-abiding citizens, if they have 2 bags of fertilizer in their garage, they're going to use it anyway. So with no realistic chance of preventing people from being lawbreakers, I'd like to give them the chance not to be lawbreakers.
So you're just throwing an 8-month amnesty on this whole process?
No, it's not on
It's a stair step.
The first thing is, effective October 14th, or whenever the ordinance becomes effective, it would require at least 25% slow release. So we're taking that step. And most of their product, like I said, is in the 30% slow release. So what it will do is effectively say, okay, the stuff that is 99% urea, instant release, is now off.
You label.
So you're saying that they'll have to adjust their distribution accordingly, but still be able to get rid of...
They're willing to manufacture it at 70% encapsulation so they can label it at 50% to be in compliance with the ordinance. They're just trying to work through 100 tons of stuff that they made at 50%, but they had to label less because they're afraid of DEP pulling them and finding them. I mean, they made it at 50%, so, you know, it's still a good product, I think. So,
Commissioner, there appears to be some members of the public that are expressing a desire to speak regarding your matter.
You know, this is a difficult, Bob Bruce, difficult issue. I guess another option would be to send a letter to DEP and say, hey, we have this issue. Please don't enforce this when it's close. It's 35%, fine. We close your eyes and say it's 50%. That's another option.
Their labels has it at 33%.
I understand that.
So,
but you can say in your letter, here's what's going on. And we're concerned about business, local business. It's another option. You know, I don't know whether that works for you. I don't know how it works with DEP.
well, it doesn't change what I'm proposing then, because what you're saying is it makes what they have legal.
Correct.
And they're going to use it anyway. So, but that's what we're saying here in the motion. So.
I think what you want to do is stop egregious issues.
Exactly. And that's what this will do. As of October 14th, the 1% slow release is gone. It's got to be at least 25%.
I understand.
So,
you know, I'm just offering you another path.
Okay.
I do have something else I'd like to talk about. You guys go ahead and do this.
We need to call you back?
Yeah, it's on another subject.
Okay.
Okay. Any further discussion on this? So that's a motion by Commissioner O'Brien, seconded by Commissioner Solari. And will you please repeat the motion?
Just effective October 14th, or whenever the ordinance is effective, it would require a minimum of 25% slow release nitrogen. And effective June 1st, 2014, would require a minimum 50% slow release nitrogen.
And it wouldn't, listen, I'm good with this. It's just, I think really it's something a little more simpler. It's just call it a inventory burn grace period countywide. I mean, but let's go ahead and move on. I think there's a whole lot to do about nothing.
Council, you good with this? Will this be able to be worked in? We have any advertising concerns, filing concerns, or implementation concerns?
Two issues. One, what I heard earlier on a previous motion from the board was that I'll be bringing to this board an amendment to the fertilizer ordinance anyway, which addresses the clarification of the applicability to just unincorporated parts of Indian River County. And what I'll do is I'll incorporate this into that bill. So we'll have one bill that'll come forward, be looking to, again, have that as a public notice item at the September 17th meeting, and then bring it to your October 1st meeting, and then that would go into effect hopefully before October 14th, so everything would line up. So I'm working on trying to make sure we get that done today so we can get that added as an agenda item out tomorrow. But my other question is, and I'm not trying to be silly on this, is I've got a summary that I've drafted, and I've got a summary that reflects the 50% nitrogen. I've got a summary that reflects the applicability portion. And we want to make sure that we send a letter out with those summaries out to individuals, to the other cities today. And I'm just trying to make sure, or try to get some guidance as to how am I mirroring a summary of what the ordinance says today versus what we're proposing. And I'm just looking for any pointers or guidance from the board on that.
I would suggest, in terms of the bullet points that you've already come up with, to just leave it at the 50%. And you, in the cover letter that you send with it, you just note that, Commissioner O'Brien brilliantly realized this problem, and that this is how we addressed it at today's meeting. It'd be one paragraph, and that would, I think, cover it.
See what happens when you help Mrs. Slurry clean up after the barbecue when her husband's gone home early, then you get all this praise and stuff from him. So.
Yeah, and how
you understand how to get to me, don't you?
Yes.
I know your soft spot, Commissioner.
Well, even better than spreadsheets is through my wife.
Thank you for that guidance. We'll work that into the materials.
It sounds like we got somewhere. It's as Bob Bruce said, it's a tough situation. Again, I would like to see as swift response as we can get for the lagoon. And in addition, I do believe it's an unfair economic burden on a distributorship in Indian River County. And with that, Commissioner, maybe I'll hold back on the word use of brilliant, because your head's going to swell. It's just been...
I'm not worried about his head.
No?
No.
Yeah, you're not sitting next to it.
Well, I don't have that light shining on me either, so...
Wow. Well, if it
Right.
explodes,
I think we
you'll
need
hear
to
it.
call this question. We're getting...
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you.
5-0.
Thank you, gentlemen. I would like to add one thing, too, because in our ordinance it says no phosphorus without a soil test. They do offer soil tests down there. You can just pick up the bag, put the soil in it, fill it out, and they'll send it off, and then you get a computerized printout of all the nutrients and everything in there.
And how much is it?
I don't know how much they charge for that. I can find out. But
And you could put a
at
small
least,
sample of your
because
soil.
we had that in there, I didn't know where do you get a soil test done, but they offer that. So just a little...
You can also go to the Ag Extension agents if you want soil tests. There are two different levels. One is for just nitrogen and phosphorus, which I think is $3. The other is for more complete, and they give you these little bags and stuff, and you mail them off to...
Okay, good to know, yeah. All right.
Bob, do you need a bag?
Actually, I do have some at the house already, because even though I might not be giving out fertilizer, you still want to know what other things that the happy plants might need, because it's not just rocks. You're invited to come by and take a look. You'll probably be impressed, and it change totally your view of how the yard is transforming.
He painted the rocks green.
No, that was just on St. Patrick's Day.
With a latex paint, of course.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Next item on the agenda is Commissioner Zork's item, which is a presentation by the Genealogical Society of Indian River County, memorandum dated August 26, 2013, found on pages 310.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, sorry. This is to request, I've been spending a fair amount of time with the folks from the Genealogical Society, mainly at a lot of military events where they're going back and historically looking at a lot of older residents in the county and how they tie in with different military service and things. And in working with Mr. Young of the Genealogical Society, he had approached me a few months back about the idea of bringing a program that would be held here at the county after hours, 5 to 7. We're looking at a date of October 15th. It would also have other invited presenters from the Historical Society and other people that provide a unique perspective on the county. They do this program throughout the year in a couple of other venues, but I thought this might be one tying it in with the National Genealogical Month of October, and basically asking for your blessings to allow me to host this event in this room on that evening. It would be 5 to 5:30, open and greeting and visiting some of the tabletops that they would have set up out in the lobby. Program would be 6:30 to 7:30, and then a wrap-up of questions 6:30 to 7, and we'll be out of here by 7 o'clock or shortly thereafter.
So moved.
Thank you.
Is this just like an educational thing, or are they going to be promoting a service or anything?
No, basically just historical education perspective, and also probably would like to, and we pick the after-hours portion of it and make it available for any of the employees that might be curious about different parts about the county, but some of the things he had shared from some prior events, there's just, born and raised here, and so is Wesley, but I picked up, well, I didn't know that. Yeah, I hadn't heard that before.
Don't blame him.
Yeah.
Just as a clarification, I know that we rent out the facilities to a number of other organizations like the school board and the hospital district, and there's a fee. So,
whenever they have a meeting in here?
Yeah.
Yes.
How much we charge?
So,
130?
150.
So
with or without water?
I just think that we ought to consistently apply the fee. We've gone down this road with nonprofits before, and we've taken the position that nonprofits ought to pay for themselves. So
that wasn't my motion.
And okay, so you made a motion on that.
I do turn a lot of
Get a
nonprofits
second?
down. I will tell you because, a few years ago, we made the decision. That's why we have nonprofit rates and for-profit rates at the fair venues, and I have had to turn some down. So just
I agree with the brilliant Commissioner Slaughter down there.
Wow.
But,
Wow.
I think we do need to be consistent.
Allow him to gloat.
Yeah. I have no problem if they do want to use the facility, and genealogy is great and all, but if we have a policy and other groups are having to pay the fee, I think we need to be consistent, because once we grant one exemption, no matter how good the cause, and the next group will want the same exemption as well.
And actually, I kind of look at this as a commissioner invited them to partake with, or to bring this information and knowledge in their program to the county, as any other nonprofit could. And if there's a commissioner that would want to sponsor them and host and be part of their event, I could see the charging part. I just seem to think like it was a nice service and benefit to the residents in the county, and that I would participate and help them host it. It's not like when the hospital comes here and we set up for them, we're not here. We don't have, there's not a commissioner sponsoring that meeting event.
well, that's the same for any other nonprofit. Any other nonprofit, then they go to get one commissioner, just like the walk a mile in the shoes. I mean, basically, from what you're saying, that type of thing seems to be covered in the presentations when generally people, including the Genealogy Society, which has come here before and made a 5 or 10 minute presentation. I think that's a great opportunity. But when you're talking about the cost of keeping the facility open after hours, I don't know that this is, in the 5 years I've been here, it's never been commissioner's choice, basically, to do that. So I think, again, it doesn't take us on the right path.
I agree with that line of thinking as far as it's not commissioner's choice, but by the same token, I did have a question for Joe. Joe, what was the fee paid by the last 3 symposiums that were here, whether it be for mental health, whether it be for the lagoon, or whether it be for dependency issues?
Those were all held during the day. The commission, the mental health was and the lagoon, we didn't charge. They were all held during the day. I have turned a lot of agencies down because of our policy. So if you guys want to change it, I don't have a problem.
But by choice and discussion and commission consensus and vote, we have had those type of symposiums and services offered to the public here in the public building that their taxpayer dollars built. Is that correct? So we've had the opportunity to give them their worth in this building, other than housing all of us and housing all of them when they attend, that it is a forum for information, discussion, more or less what libraries stand for and what the steps of the libraries and the steps of the courthouses stand for, all buildings that the public pays for through tax dollars. So with that, I believe on a case-by-case basis, when an event comes to our knowledge, is specifically something of this where it's all service. There's no dollars coming in. I mean, I know Colonel Tony Young very well and all of his efforts, and I don't know if this is fully or partially attached with the veterans' efforts. It might be independent, but that man does a yeoman's job with the identification of lineage. They did it all for all of us one year, and they do it to ensure that the veterans' heritage and lineage is properly attached to the sign-tabs or anything else, and do a lot of work. And I believe that it's more or less like a public information event.
I'm sure we'll have
there's no sales here.
No, not at all.
So I don't know. There's no fundraising.
Nobody's arguing that we couldn't okay it. It's more as a matter of policy, should we okay it? And my feeling is that we shouldn't, because it opens a door and then you don't know what the limiting factor is. And again, we've got the presentations where we've allowed hundreds of different people and groups come before us for that 5 or 10 minutes, which I think is extremely appropriate. But again, I just feel that to keep the building open for 2 extra hours at the taxpayer's expense for a private sector group to come in and use it is not appropriate, and I don't know how we limit that in the future. So I just think we had addressed this about 3 or 4 years ago with charities and realized at that time that it opens the door and it becomes more and more difficult to close it. So rather than to give us something that's going to be a problem down the line, I think that we'd be doing the right thing if we basically adhered to the policy which we've already had in place for the last few years.
We do rent the rooms at the library to nonprofits. At the fairgrounds, we have a nonprofit and for-profit rate that the board approved, and that's all I'm saying. And there's 500 nonprofits, and a lot of them ask, and they pay when they. I just want to point that out. That it's up to you. I don't have a problem with whatever the commission wants to do. I was just explaining that. So, and I didn't know if this is going to be televised. That's another cost we have because I have to.
No, were you thinking about televising?
But that was one of the considerations of using this room, so it could be captured and made available for replay.
I'm with you on using this, but whenever you start talking about taking county staff time, whatever that would be, I think that would be appropriate if they wanted to go that far. That's where you would lose me in the support of this.
All right.
I think this is my standpoint is that this is the people's building, and such being the case, there's nothing being sold here, there's nothing being solicited. It's all about public education, and it's spirited by individuals that do this on a consistent basis, free of charge. And it's something that you've taken an interest in to ensure that people are aware of what can be done if they want to go back to their heritage, if they want to see how to find their lineage. I mean, they can pay on the internet.
And also some historical perspective on the founding fathers of the county, and just kind of a long historical picture of.
Yeah, I think it could be neat. How does the hospital or school board, whenever they utilize this, take care of the video?
We charge them for that. We charge them $150 to video, and we charge.
So there's a fee to rent, then a fee to video.
No, we charge $150 and for both the hospital and the school board when they utilize this facility.
And that includes the video?
Everything.
Well, if you want it video, that may be something. I don't know. I mean. You're talking about the $150 or $130, whatever it is.
Which probably just covers whatever it's going to take for somebody to be in the booth for a couple of hours and reformat the discs and have them burned up for you. So I think it's a great idea.
Do you I'm trying to help you here, Commissioner Zork. So the long and short for me is, I move that we let you have it at no charge without any staff time. If you want staff time, then it's at the
If they want to go with the videotaping, then they pay the fee charge for the camera people to be available.
Yes,
sure.
that's right.
Okay.
I could second that.
All right, thank you.
Unless you prefer to do that.
That's fine.
So
know where it's going in.
It's already done.
no staff time involved at all. And then if there is staff involved, they have to pay the fee.
The nonprofit rate, whatever that is, and 130, whatever the one.
But Joe Barrett is not going to leave the building unattended for anybody who wants to come in after hours. So the fact is there will be staff time. I mean, staff is going to be here from the time it opens until the last person is out. So, I mean, you can say no staff time if you want, but understand that that is not a realistic probability.
Okay.
Well, Commissioner Zork will be here. Undoubtedly, at least one other commissioner will be here. The rest of the building is secured. There is cleaning staff here. That door is locked. There's no way in and out of here into the rest of the building. And the cleaning staff is here during that time. And the electronic doors are generally open at that time. Mr. Maury here, is that correct?
Exit only after 5:30, I think.
What time does it intro to exit only? I just want to see what type of staff we would need if there is a concern.
Chris Morrow, Public Works Director. They are set to lock at a certain time. It would depend on the ending date of the meeting. If it ended after the time that they're normally set to lock, which is when the custodial vendor leaves, then we would be covered without any staff. If we had to keep a staff member later to make sure the building was secure because the meeting ended after custodial staff left, then there would be some additional staff time involved. So it's kind of hard to know without the time prior to the meeting.
It would be is out of the building by 7.
Then we'd be covered with the custodial staff. We wouldn't need any staff time.
Okay.
There we go. All right. Any further discussion, gentlemen? Motion by Commissioner Davis, seconded by myself. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries 4-1 with Commissioner Solari dissenting. And the next discussion is the best value procurement by Commissioner Zork.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I hadn't ever heard of best value procurement until we went through the county attorney interview processes, and I believe there was 2. One of the applicants from Polk County, and I believe the one from Brevard, had mentioned it as a tool that they've used in looking at how purchasing and procurement is done for county purposes. In part, they looked at, if you look at the RFQ process, and you look at the questionnaire and the type of questions they asked, there's items that are not fairly addressed in terms of if you have a chronic, or not a chronic, but a contractor that runs over on his time, yes, we may have the ability to fine him, but it doesn't go against him from getting another job, to potentially delivering that late and so on. Also, we have under the best value procurement, when you look at in the final rating, and this could be you use the RFQ, and this could be an additional set of questionnaires that go with it, not trying to take the RFQ process out or the RFP process, but on the final rating, you have things that they would look at the bidding company or submitting company. Change orders, project delays, poor quality, owner surprises, complaints, ability to submit accurate and timely weekly reports. The things that are not covered at all under the RFQ or RFP process. And I think Commissioner O'Brien had mentioned that I think you also heard from the Polk County applicant on this best value procurement a little bit during some of the interview process. It seems to be something we might want to consider. I know I field a number of complaints from residents in the Arbor Trace area on the Oslo Road job, and I did get an update from Public Works on it's not as bad as it seems. We've had a number of rain delays. We've had other things. But the people down there are just getting understand why it's taking so long. Yes, it has had rain, and then if you look at the exceptional speed that the other contractor's been making on 66th Avenue from 4th Street to 16th Street, the scope of work was much greater, in my opinion, but they're light years ahead of the two projects. Are not anywhere near in the appearance stage. Now, appearance isn't always what you look at in the road building world, but the bridges and the curbings and the bases and the first lift of asphalt is in. Those are visual things you can see that you had to do all that other stuff before you got to that. And on Oslo, we're only looking at still trying to shift and build the first two new lanes to the north. Then once those are open, we've got to do the other lanes, replace the existing lanes that are there. And also I've fielded some complaints or questions of if we're currently in litigation with a prior vendor to the county, why are we still giving that vendor new business when you have unresolved litigation with a vendor on a prior job? And again, this the best value procurement takes those issues into consideration in the scoring process, just like an RFQ does. They go through and they have the different points that they accrue. The PPI score stays with the applicant on their current job, and I guess it would get updated as they would submit for other and new work. But it's something to consider, to look at to see if we... Now, in Polk County, they said the biggest value that they've seen on the process is streamlining and improving efficiency on your larger projects. And I don't know if larger means greater than $1 million, but larger type projects, road projects, utility projects, that they've seen an improvement in the work product and kind of the whole process for procurement over in their county. So it's something to consider. Maybe ask the county attorney to maybe look into it a little bit, bring up some of the other benefits, pluses and minuses, and see if it's something we'd like to look at implementing at the county.
One thing, that according to your backup, Commissioner, it says that this started in February 2009. So I'd hope that Polk County would have some sort of staff report that we could get our hands on.
Yeah, and they may,
in terms of,
sure.
So that'd be good if we can get a copy of that staff report, which tells exactly what their experience was.
Right.
That'd be helpful.
And I'll find the applicant's name from there, and he said whether, obviously he's not here, but he said he's very sold on the process, and he said he'd be available to share their experience with it, with whoever we did pick. So I'll get that information to Dylan. And then it actually originated out of Arizona State, I believe probably 2 decades ago roughly, was the theory behind a professor that came up with this new process, and a number of municipalities and counties around the country are starting to implement this, and we'll dig into it a little further and see what else we can bring back to you.
I have some comments on it. Now, I think it hurts the small vendors, and we really go through this process anyway. When we get a bid in, we competitive bid most of our roads, and I guess we're not going to do that anymore, because we competitively bid the roads, and the lowest, most responsive bidder gets it. And we know how many, if we usually deal, like right now we've got the 3 major projects, and we're fortunate they're local bidders. You've got Tim Rose on the one project, you've got Ranger on one and Gettler on the other, which we've all done business with and know, and we obviously it is Chris's job to monitor these road projects. But what we're worried about is if they have to pre-register, what time frame, when do they register? And some of these little outfits we deal with, a lot of our little bids are not good with paperwork, but they're good
well,
local.
Maybe part of the comment is to set a threshold. This would only apply to anticipated projects of X scale. If that's where the benefit value happens to be, and not maybe not look at using it on the smaller projects, and try to see where's the best applicable project range that it could get applied to.
And I'd like it not just to be, because I know that was an attorney that told you, but he doesn't run the daily operations usually, right. So I appreciate him using that as one of his things. And not just have the legal, but also have my staff involved in evaluating this, because they're the ones that run the project.
And purchasing.
Public Works, I mean.
Yeah, both of them.
Because
Public Works, utilities.
Before we go forward with
Have
this,
a
I mean,
purchasing manager.
Learn more.
we need all, yeah, there may be something useful in this, and so if there is, use it. But we also want to make sure that staff understands or articulates to us how it may impact the cost of a project. For instance, if this is going to cost 25 or 30% more for road projects,
Right, no deal.
and we've already,
Right.
had to winnow down our road projects, we're certainly not going to take another one off the 5-year list in order to add the process. But
Sure.
I mean, the first steps just to see if there is something useful, I think, is fine.
Yeah, I think what Commissioner's works, whether it gets approved or not, the way the fashion he's bringing it forward to see to a consensus is the right way to
There
go
are
about it.
better ideas out there in some counties. I mean, not too many.
No, I can't
Understand,
imagine
not with
that.
the brilliant Commissioner O'Brien on one side and the brilliant Commissioner Solari on the other. So there would be few and far between. But
I think it's the
I'd hate
haircuts.
I'd hate for us to pass up any opportunities that are
That's
out
a good
there.
point, because we might be able to save electricity with all this brilliance. And we could just be illuminated by your presence.
I hear that in the City Hall and in the City of Vero Beach, they have to have 200 more watts during their meetings just to make up for the lack of brilliance.
I heard when you left the city council in
But
Vero that they had to put
that's
in
when they
additional
actually-
lighting.
When they did put in the extra lighting, that's true.
That was well discussed.
They're on Vero Beach Electric.
Why don't we have
Getting
staff?
back on topic, Joe?
Why don't we have staff look into this with my purchasing, Jason, Chris, and also Dylan and myself will look into it and bring a report back. Now, when did you want the report back on this
just
one?
when they work it into their, not like next week or anything, but, whatever time, if they need a month to bring it back, that's fine.
All right.
Joe, can you guys also look at the ISO standards?
For insurance?
No, I think ISO is an international rating that you apply for as a private business, and you have to do a lot of these things here.
Like the ISO 9000
Yeah,
compliance.
the ISO, is that, okay, the ISO 9000.
Okay.
What the heck is that? It's an international standard, and it's volumes of stuff that you have to go through, but it's all about documentation and quality control, and a lot of the things that are a component here.
So you can be considered for federal
And
contract.
it might be something easier to say, okay, if a company is ISO rated,
Right.
they get 5 bonus points in the bid process or something.
You've been staying too local.
Yeah, I'd rather
just been
say if
saying
they
too
have a
long.
3296 something zip code.
We tried that one.
Well, no, you don't want to shut it down on that buy local agreement. But in any event, so we don't need a motion on that. We'll just have a consensus, and staff understands that we're looking at it.
Okay, great.
Thank you, Commissioner Zork. Appreciate it. Next item on the agenda is the Solid Waste Disposal District approval of the minutes for July 17, 2013. Second. That's a motion by Commissioner O'Brien, seconded by myself. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. And final pay for Geosentech Work Order Number 6, Engineering and Construction Support Services for the Landfill Expansion Project, memorandum dated August 29, 2013.
So moved. Second.
And that's a motion by Commissioner Solari, seconded by Commissioner O'Brien. Mr. Burke, you sure you don't want to give us a presentation? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Great presentation. Earlier, gentlemen, as Commissioner was discussing, Mr. Bob Bruce had said he had something else to close with, and if it so please the board, Mr. Bob Bruce would like to say a few words.
As you all know, we're doing Hands Across the Lagoon September 28th. We have a safety issue on the Wabasso Causeway, not on the Barber Bridge. John Orcutt's going to be doing the Barber Bridge for on behalf of Pelican Island Audubon Society. I'll be doing the Wabasso Bridge. The sheriff is going to be out there. That's been ordered throughout, all up and down the lagoon. Every place that this is going to be, the sheriff of that county is going to be there for safety. In the past, we've closed down the Wabasso Bridge, one lane of it, on events like this. The bikers, cancer thing, I forgot. There's been several where it's been closed down. Chris has already said that he really does not want to close down the Wabasso Bridge, but I'm starting to get a little antsy about this, and I would like you all to consider this. I don't know how many people are going to show up. You guys saw how many people showed up down south of here. I mean, it was thousands. I don't know. So if you could coordinate with me and Holly Dill with the ELC, maybe we can come to some agreement. I don't know what it is. 15 minutes is probably all we need.
That's it. Well, Mr. Bruce, I will say that in further discussion, the causeway is not for us to close.
Say it again.
The causeway is not for us to close. That would be an FDOT decision to close that roadway.
So it's not a county issue. It's a state.
It's not a county roadway.
That particular bridge is FDOT's bridge.
I'm happy to work with you to individually or collectively, but I will call and we will find out if we can do that.
Okay.
If anybody else any suggestion, we cannot close that 512 510 causeway.
I understand.
Without the express permission and consent of the FDOT, which I will try to get, if that's the case.
You understand my concern.
Yeah. Bob, are you talking about the high-span bridge, or are you talking from the western edge of the high-span bridge back towards US 1? I mean, when you say causeway, what are we referring to?
Yeah, my understanding is that all of these things, all up and down the lagoon, are hands across the lagoon, all the way across the lagoon.
Okay, so you're talking then from the eastern edge of the high-span bridge to somewhere close to US 1?
Well, we're not having a problem with the causeway itself. I mean, think about it. There's a little pedestrian path there, so we don't have a problem there on the approach to the bridge. That bridge, there's no place for a pedestrian to get up on that bridge. It's bad.
Let me meet with the sheriff. I've seen I've seen events where the sheriff just stops traffic for about 15 minutes, and
as opposed to going through the whole request process.
It could be a disabled vehicle on top of the bridge, and they got to close it.
In fact, on that particular bridge it occurred. I was there when it occurred. I didn't know, and it was something regarding law enforcement, and they had a big parade, and they closed it. And So let me check into it and see what the sheriff and see what we can do. Well,
that sounds a whole lot easier if it's considered a parade, and then we just have to do that. You don't believe that we would need FDOT approval?
Let me find out and see what we can do, especially
happy to
with
work
something.
that if we have to.
It's always easier to beg forgiveness.
Right. If you could coordinate that with Holly.
Yeah, because I will, because that is really an unsafe area. That's a narrow, you get people on that bridge. I would hate.
It'd be better to have it just
closed for a couple minutes.
You know, when they were doing that work on that bridge, I was going back and forth across that bridge. I had several of my good friends scrape up the side of their car because they shortened it. I don't know how much it was, 5 feet even. We had school buses running on the side of the concrete there, so it's not a safe bridge.
No, especially for that type of event. We want to see hands across the lagoon. We don't want to see bodies in the lagoon.
Right.
So,
thank you.
With that, we'll see what we can do. I'll work with Joe if that's all right. If it satisfies the request, at least we can explore it.
Okay.
And if the sheriff can come up with something for us to make it happen, whether it requires a couple of cars and cones.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, good?
Yes.
Gentlemen, thank you. Meeting adjourned.